decent lunch. Before we go on to item 20, which I have brought forward, I would just like to reiterate that we are all councillors and we are paid from the public purse to do our jobs, which includes turning up at essential meetings of the council. And if a member asks me to rearrange the meeting in order that they are not disadvantaged, then that is what I will try to do to the best of my ability. Of course, if that reason is no fault of their own. And in the case that was discussed just before we went to break, Councillor Mack was assisted by our IT experts, and it was deemed to be appropriate that he used the office in Council HQ in order that he could connect to this meeting, which they would have done for any one single member. I can rearrange a meeting to help councillors. I cannot arrange childcare for children or grandchildren, so I won't entertain any more ludicrous comments. Please, it's your duty to be here. The public expect you to be here. So I don't want any horrible comments like that from any other members. Thank you. And I'm going to move on now to the item that I've brought forward, which is item 20, and it's motion 10 by Councillors Andy Doig and Eileen McCartan. Councillor Doig, if you want to read out your motion, please.
Okay, thanks, Provost. Will do. Motion 10 is about reform of the hate crime bill, and it starts, this council agrees with the sentiment behind the proposed hate crime bill, which the SNP government is currently promoting through Holyrood, but calls for radical amendment of the bill to ensure it does not undermine free speech. In particular, council demands that the intention to commit hate crime must be enshrined in the bill as a core principle, as should a clause which defends satire under Scots law as providing speech as protected speech, in order to defend the rights of artists, comedians and writers. Now, I'd like to begin, Provost, by saying I very much welcome the statement by the Justice Secretary Hamza Yousaf a day or so ago that he intends to insert the intent of hate into the hate crime bill. That's a very, very welcome addition. It hasn't happened yet, so I'm happy to let the motion stand as it is. It's a very unusual piece of legislation, Provost, that can manage to unite both the Catholic Church and the National Secular Society in opposition to it. But the hate crime bill has managed it, and it's unfortunately managed it because it's an extremely, extremely draconian piece of legislation that would not be out of place in Vichy France, to be honest. Some of the measures, for example, in Part 2, would actually lead to the restoration of the censorship of public performances of theatre, which was banned in the UK or ended in the UK in 1968. And I just think that level of scrutiny, government scrutiny, in a free society is absolutely outrageous. There's also in Part 2 vague references to stirring up hatred. Now, this will be left, Provost, to sheriffs and the police to interpret, which is why no less than the Scottish Police Federation, the Faculty of Advocates and the Law Society of Scotland all oppose it. You've also got many, many long-standing rights campaigners, and can I mention in particular a prominent critic of the hate crime bill, gay rights campaigner Peter Tatchell, who has spent a lifetime fighting hatred against the gay and lesbian community. And writer Val McDermid, there's been great concern amongst the artistic community in Scotland, many of whom, I might add, like myself, are prominent, are pro-independence supporters. People like Val McDermid and other individuals who are opposing the threat to free speech. I feel that some of the mistakes are being made, the lessons have not been learned, unfortunately, about the failures of the named persons legislation and the offensive behaviour against football legislation. I was never convinced about named person because what you had to do is not appoint a named person to interfere in family life, but actually make sure that police and social work are collaborative enough. That's what led to some of the high-profile tragic cases of child abuse and child death. The Offensive Behaviour of Football Act I did support, and I even opposed its repeal, Provost, because I'm just absolutely abhor sectarianism of any kind. But I had to come to the conclusion it was the vague wording of that bill, a mistake that's being made again here, that led to its repeal. It was unworkable. The judges and the sheriffs and the police once again believed it to be unworkable. I think we have this situation. Lord Bracadale called a few years ago for a consolidation of hate crime law in Scotland. And I think that's why the SNP government have obviously decided to do this. Now, recently, the Tory MSPs in Holyrood wanted to repeal the whole bill. If we can't amend it, I am not unsympathetic to that point of view, because I think it would be a serious threat to civil liberties and to free speech if this bill unamended went ahead. But I do accept that the SNP government want to pilot it. They're determined to push it ahead. So I think we have to accept the case for radical amendment. But we did have, I'll finish on this, Provost, we do have sufficient laws in place, and they are robust. And I'll finish by giving a local example. In 2012, I managed to assist a lesbian couple in Johnston who were getting harassed by a neighbour. I put them in touch with the police diversity unit, and at the latter end of the day, the man was prosecuted, I believe. We do have robust laws in Scotland to deal with hate crime, and that's as it should be. But there's no law, nor should there be a law about no one has a right not to be offended. So the two are entirely different concepts. And with the hate crime bill, we're starting to verge into a situation which is potentially very authoritarian, very anti-intellectual, because the whole basis of a free society is the ability to debate and discuss. And when you try to curb that in any way, then that's a danger. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Doig. Councillor McCartan.
Thank you, Provost. Hate crime is awful. We all say that. I hope we all believe that. I'm not sure how much we need a new bill, but I understand that there are areas of life which possibly need to be added to the statute to ensure that it does not just apply to race and religion. Intent is the most important part of any action which can be seen as a hate crime, and it's absolutely missing from the existing bill. I know the mover of the bill has said he would look at amending it, and I know in the last couple of days he has said he will do this, but without some drastic amendments, this bill should not go ahead. But if the mover sees sense, it may prove to have some merit. The second paragraph of the motion that we have refers in particular to the stirring up offences put forward by the Scottish Government. This has led to serious, widespread and legitimate concerns about their impact on freedom of expression. We need a law which is fit for purpose, but we don't want one which causes more problems than it solves. I would ask you, colleagues, to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Okay, I believe we have 3 amendments. We have one from Councillor Mack, we have one from Councillor Sharkey, I believe, and I believe we also have one from Councillor Nicholson. Correct me if I'm wrong with the names.
No, so we don't have an amendment, Provost.
Oh, my apologies, sorry. Okay, thanks. You want to speak though, Ian, don't you?
Yeah, I've commended behind Councillor Dowling.
All right. I'll bring in Councillor Mack first with your amendment. Could you read out your amendment, Councillor Mack?
No, I couldn't. Hang on. Just bear with me. Sorry. I thought you were all in possession of it. Forgive me. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
It is with the keenest pleasure we announce on behalf of all present and future employees of Mr. Douglas Ross of Mandela Mansions, Morningside, postcode EH?, 1, the appointment of Mr. Russell Finlay Communications Director of the Conservative Party, once described in this forum as the love child of Ludovic Kennedy and Veronica Guerin. This authority owes Mr. Finlay a huge debt in exposing with unparalleled courage and perspicacity the terrifying political failures in our criminal justice system. We genuinely wish him every success in all his future endeavours. Mr. Finlay, we salute you.
Do you have a seconder, Councillor Mack?
I take it from the deafening silence, Provost, that I don't, but can I have it for the purposes of the record in the minute? My dissent recorded that the amendment failed, and simply address the motion as it now stands.
Okay.
Okay,
Councillor,
shall I press on?
Thank you. You shall press on.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I mean, I cannot quarrel with just about anything the previous speakers have said, the mover and the seconder. Can I, again, follow Councillor Doig's example, and I'll conclude with a local event. It's best described. The position at the moment is with, I'm afraid, the Scottish Parliament, is they must be seen to do something. And they're obsessed with this, that the answer always lies in legislation. This is a howler. This is the Dangerous Dogs Act on stilts. I hate anti-Semitism. Now, there will already be councillors within the Labour group penning to the Standards Commission. Well, gotcha. Mike, see, the words speak for themselves. Now, people in possession of certain words have entirely separate meanings. The notion, and Councillor McCartan alluded to it, about intent, it's very difficult to even discern intent by people's words. But this is now going to be used as a tool. Someone made references earlier on obliquely to a woke culture, and Councillor Doig repeated it. There is no right not to be offended. It's one of the few pleasures left to the lower orders that we can take a pop out our politicians. And to try and dress this up, as we see so often in this council, as they pen complaints to the Standards Commission, and worse. So let me just pause at this juncture and give you an example of what we're dealing with and what the future looks like. I wrote an email. Now, forgive me, I have literary pretensions, but I'm a lonely old soul. And during lockdown loneliness, I am consumed. We're talking about hate crime. If it's any comfort to you all, and I mean this sincerely, the only person I hate, my religion forbids me, by the way, to hate anyone, but the only person I hate is myself. I'm consumed with self-loathing, and I try and genuinely be self-deprecating. So when I say to someone, in any decent society, you would certainly have come round to your house, amputated your right arm with a blunt spoon, and hit it over the head with a soggy end. I won't go into the other part of it. I don't mean that. Does anyone, you'd need to be reading that upside down to take the idea that I meant that there was some criminal intent. Yet we have councillors who are on the phone 400 yards from a care home who just suffered the loss of 18 deaths, phoning the police, Scotland's finest, asking them to prosecute a councillor for saying that. That's where we are at the moment. What in God's name is it going to be like when we have this in legislation? It's crazy. Listen, I couldn't care if you're a member of the Bombay Bicycle Club, a utopian cyclist, an extreme Welsh tobacconist. But at the very core, you have to have freedom of speech. You have to have freedom of expression, and you can't have the Sharkies, the Devines and the Sheridans in this world being the arbiters of good taste. If they don't like what I say, and Mackay as well, Councillor Mackay, you want to go up here, your big girl's gym slip. That's a disgrace. You want to be ashamed of yourself.
Councillor Mack, please.
Sorry.
I don't want to have to silence you.
Oh, I know you don't. But let me just conclude.
Your time's almost up.
I think I've just about covered it.
Your time's almost up.
This is going to be a law fest for defrocked lawyers who can spend their time trying. You cannot, by people's words in most cases, maybe in some, define or discern criminal intent, but you will never do that with legislation. And just finally, we have, it is discriminatory, by the way. In Scotland, if you're a councillor, you must show respect. I don't know of any other group on the planet Putin, Kim Jong-un, no one insists in their opponents demand respect. This is what Churchill said, be kind to alligators in the hope they're going to eat you last. This is an outrage.
Okay, Paul, I have to...
God.
Your time is up. Thank you. We've got a big...
Can I just conclude with one sentence, Provost?
One sentence, one.
The meeting today, we need to re-examine this. This is a nightmare. I've had my fair share of privations over the years, but see having to sit through this. Councillor Roden is spot on.
Okay.
This is just a grouse meeting.
No, sorry, Paul. Look, there are other people are waiting to enter the debate.
Me that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I'm going to bring in Councillor Sharkey. Councillor Sharkey, you have an amendment, haven't you?
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
Right.
Jim.
Bear with me and I'll bring up the amendment here. Right. And of course it's... Right. So, it's the nature, right, of really serious... sorry, I have to read this out first, don't I? Right. This council has serious concerns about Part 2 of the bill as currently drafted and considers that it will require substantial revision if it is to be fit for purpose, and urges the Scottish Government to work with stakeholders and the Parliament throughout the legislative process to amend the bill so that it does deal robustly with hate crime, protect individuals while protecting the privileges that people enjoy with regard to free speech, and builds consensus that prejudice and hatred have no place in Scotland. And what I'm going to say about that is that hopefully it has the serious tone that I think this debate actually should have. Now, as I was going to say, it lends itself, when it's such a serious issue, to satire and to fun poking. And that's something that, as I said, we've just heard at least one councillor attempt. I'm certainly not going to go there with this particular issue, because we've reached a point now with the type of legislation, and I've got to say that I could have just as easily used Andy Doid's speech to do this particular my particular bit as well, because he's hit the nail on the head about the rights to free speech without trying to tell people what to think. Right, and what was the expression used there about? I think we used more than once today about you don't have a right to be offended. But if we look back, Councillor McEwen used that exact same argument at this meeting. I would argue that there's been another 2 examples of it for anyone who's got the time to go back through this particular broadcast. Right, there's twice it's been used. This idea that you can use cancel culture to bully and threaten people not to put their correct and true opinion, in front of the public, because that is the matter for democracy, is for the voters to choose these particular matters. Now, no one says that someone should be allowed to daub racist graffiti on a Jewish tombstone, or that they should put a pig's head on the on anybody's temple, if it's offensive to their religion. These are acts of deliberate disrespect, and I would argue violence against those people and their beliefs. However, on that, it's the act that is the problem, and this idea of trying to include intent in legislation and second guessing why a person was doing something is very, very dangerous if you're going to try and include it in legislation. And frankly, I'm very, very worried that this would be the start of the slippery slope down to the sort of the phrase used earlier on was Vichy, France. In fact, I'd say closer to Italy in the 1920s if we allow this to go down, and we face the prospect, in an independent Scotland, of having people as intolerant as Councillor McEwen and as able to be easily offended as Councillor McEwen, right, telling us what we can and what we cannot say. Right? And again, I think it's been a theme throughout this particular meeting we've seen over and over again. So hopefully, right, just to lighten it slightly, Councillor Doig did say that he was in favour of a radical amendment. Ask him to accept this amendment, right, in the spirit with which it's meant, because I don't think we fall out, that far. And if we can take that forward, I think we reach a better understanding, right, certainly of our side of the argument, and also hopefully we'll be able to bring those people who are on the opposite side of the argument just now, with us, because it's a very easy. And I'm resisting the temptation to use the word lazy, but it's a very easy way of thinking, right? Just to say, oh, that's wrong, I'm against it, right? You have to think through, right, what it is, the implications further down the line, right? And I hope, right, that we can do that, right? Because we've had
Councillor Shaki, could you start to wind up, please?
I'll do that. I was just going to finish on this point. We've had anti-hate crime legislation for many years now, right? In most cases, right, there's been a decrease, right, in that over the whole piece, right. So we have it. It is working. It may not be working perfectly. It could certainly be improved. But let's not, right, start down a slippery slope. We start saying, "I'm going to tell you what to think."
Thank you, Councillor Shaki. And Councillor Hart is your second, I believe.
No,
Councillor?
no, Provost, it's me, myself, Councillor Devine.
Okay.
I'll just formally second it just now, because this could go on for quite a while.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Devine. Okay, can I bring in, well, first of all, can I ask Councillor Doig if he is willing to accept Councillor Shaki's amendment?
Yes, Provost, I'm happy to accept it. I think it's a good amendment.
Okay. Councillor Dowling?
Thank you, Provost. I would like to support many of the comments that have been made. The comments that I would like to add are around the hate bill draft legislation as it stands proposes to create a new offence of stirring up hatred against a list of protected characteristics. Now, the bill as currently drafted does not require an accused to have intended to stir up hatred for a conviction to be handed down. A jury need only find that it is likely that hatred will be stirred up, and an accused can be jailed for up to 7 years if found guilty. As other people have acknowledged, there is now a proposal to amend the hate bill to require proof of intent. Now, while this concession is welcome, it does underscore how dangerous this bill is and its authoritarian overreach. It doesn't change or address, rather, the fundamental flaws of Part 2 of this bill, which is an all-out assault on freedom of expression, and requiring intent doesn't alter that. So my final comment is that without radical reconstruction, Part 2 should be deleted in its entirety. And until it is, freedom of speech remains under threat in Scotland and, unbelievably, subject to state sanction.
Thank you, Councillor Dowling. Can I bring in Councillor Mackay now, please?
Hello, Provost. I raised a point of order during Councillor Mack's oratory there, which you ignored, and asked you to stop.
I'm sorry, I didn't see a point of order.
So you allowed him to complete his oratory without sanction. I'm very disappointed.
Alistair, can you explain a wee bit more what your issue is?
Well, you allowed Councillor Mack to repeat what he put in writing, for which he'd been investigated by the Standards Commission.
Alistair, it was intimated to me that Councillor Mack had a motion. An amendment. Councillor Mack is entitled to read an amendment the same way as you would be entitled to read your amendment.
But then he went on to make a comment. He made comments about other councillors.
Councillor Mackay.
And I raised a point of order, and you didn't acknowledge it.
I didn't see your point of order. I am busy trying to keep track of the meeting and the speakers and a chat with the officers, and I cannot do everything. I apologise. I am under a bit of stress having to conduct the meeting in this way, and I apologise if I didn't see a comment that you have left. I haven't seen any comments any councillor has left. As I have repeated before many, many times, councillors are adults. They are responsible for their own comments. And if they make comments that other members are not happy with, there is a process that you can use in order to take action against that councillor. I am not God. I can't send a lightning bolt down to shut you all up. You have a certain amount of responsibility yourselves. And if you say something that isn't appropriate, then you need to take the rap for that, whoever dishes that out. So I apologise for not seeing your message. I'm going to move on. This is going to be a long day. Other people want to speak. Councillor McEwen.
Thanks, Provost. I simply want to make a comment, if you'll allow me. Councillor Sharkey, you are very wrong in your interpretation of my values, and I am sure many people will agree with this. My goodness, how wrong you were with that interpretation. And that is me taking advantage of freedom of speech. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Councillor Steele.
Aye, thank you very much, Provost. I'm sitting here trying to work out if we're authoritarian super freaks or if we're far too liberal and we just let people say whatever they like. We seem to be getting it for both ends. I have no problem with this motion at all, but happy to vote for it. But I would like to just make a very brief comment on Councillor Sharkey telling other people about bullying and what to think. And I'd just like to say, oh, it's some poor the gift to give us to see ourselves as others see us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Councillor Nicholson.
Thanks, Provost. I won't be too long on this one. I think Councillor Sharkey appears to not understand what exactly was happening with the hate bill. Events have overtaken us a wee bit here with the Minister yesterday making his announcement about the issue of intent. And he's also made it very clear there'll be quite significant amendments made to this bill as it proceeds its way through the various stages. Can I just make a point that every right that we have to express ourselves is a qualified right. I mean, you don't have a right to be offensive. You don't have a right to hurt people. It's all qualified under the law and it always has been for a long time. So the point I'm trying to make is that, yes, we need to protect freedoms and we need to protect people's rights to be expressive, whether in the arts. I mean, I like a good comedian, you know, and a lot of them could be classed as offensive, you know, particularly some good Glasgow comedians I really like. But they need to be free to express their art without being overly chastised or criticised or pursued by the law. And the other point I want to make as well is that the council responded to this during the recess in July through the normal processes. And I asked the officers about some aspects of it because it was very much a lot of the content was about misogynistic behaviour, etc. And I asked about misandry, which is a very unused, heard of term, but that's about misogynistic behaviour in a way, but the male version of it. So I was quite clear that if you're going to deal with that as violence perpetrated against another person of a gender, then we as a council should reflect that because there is violence out there perpetrated against men as well. So I was quite clear when I read through the response from the council that we were dealing with all the set questions that you normally get, but we had to make sure that we were dealing with all forms of hate and the way it's domestic violence comes about. So what I'm saying to you is that we're happy to support the motion as it's written, and part 3 of it was the only one that gave us a wee bit of a sort of sticky point about it. But given that the Minister yesterday has dealt with that issue, we're quite content to support the motion the way it's phrased, simply because, yes, we want to protect freedom of speech, we want to protect freedom of expression, but just bear in mind that it is qualified. It's all qualified, society qualifies everything that we do. So that's the only point I want to make, Provost. And it's quite a good discussion so far, and I think that's the way we should maybe conduct it on this forum. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Nicholson. So we have, I think that's everyone that's spoken that wanted to speak.
Provost, I wanted to say a couple of words if I could.
Oh, sorry, Jacqueline, I didn't see your
queue. I think
your
my queue's way up the list now.
Okay.
I'll be really brief, I promise, because I know everybody must be exhausted. No, I just wanted to say that despite, you know, people's misgivings about freedom of speech, there is a genuine desire at the heart of this legislation to change negative and entrenched attitudes to certain members of our society. And there's been a couple of comments about woke, as if woke is something negative. Definition of woke is alert to injustice in society, especially racism. So I just want to have it on record that I'm proud to be woke. And I think that in this chamber, we all should have a wee bit more wokeness about us. And again, right now we're in the midst of a pandemic. We're hoping to be a bit kinder to each other. Oh, somebody's exited.
Okay, can we find it? Jacqueline, can you just halt there for a second?
Sure.
Did someone leave the meeting? I just want to make sure it was intentional.
I dropped out, Lorraine. I'm now back. Thanks.
Okay, that's fine, Stephen. Thank you. Sorry, Jacqueline, can you carry on?
Just my final point is, in the midst of a global pandemic where we should be being a bit kinder to each other, this is one of the most ill-tempered meetings that I've been at in the virtual chamber. I think we should remember what people out there are having to deal with in terms of COVID. I think anybody, member of the public who is watching this meeting, will be ashamed and embarrassed about the way that their elected members are behaving. And I point to the chat bar particularly in that instance. That's all.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Okay, we have no more speakers. Councillor Davidson is advising that she needs to leave the meeting, and I think Councillor Dowling has to go too. Can I move back to Councillor Andy Doig to sum up?
Thanks, Provost. I think it has been a good debate. It's been quite measured. I'll respond to a few of the comments made. I do think Councillor Sharkey's amendment is a good amendment. But I didn't agree with his specific, although I'm accepting his amendment, I didn't agree with his specific point, which conflated authoritarianism with being in favour of independence. Councillor Sharkey and I won't agree about the Constitution, but I have to say some of the leading lights of the SNP in the 70s, like the late Billy Wolfe and the late Margaret MacDonald, would have been absolutely appalled at this piece of legislation that's came forward. And I think it's a disgrace to the SNP's historical commitment to free speech and to debate and to democratic debate. And I'd like to make that point. Councillor Nicholson made some very good points, because freedom of speech is qualified, but I do agree with Councillor Sharkey and Councillor Mack. Nobody has the right not to be offended, and there seems to be in current society today elements, and Councillor Cameron described it as woke. The term, I believe, is an American term, but I mean, it seems to think more in terms of slogans rather than analysis. The woke movement, to me, seems to lack a great amount of critical analysis about things. It seems to be superficial. It doesn't seem to understand. There's no class dimension to the woke movement as far as I can see. It's very focused on gender and other issues. So I think there's a complete lack of economic analysis around about the woke movement. So I've always been in favour of rights. As a founder member of the SNP anti-apartheid group in 1986, before many of the current SNP councillors were members of the SNP, I've always had a lifelong commitment against anti-racism, and the Justice Secretary Hamza Youssef knows that, which is why when I sent in my comments to the consultation, I got a personal response back. But it's been a good debate, and I hope the motion gets passed. I think it will. And as I say, I think the Labour amendment is a sound one. Thanks.
Good. Glad you got a personal response, Andy. Okay, would I be right in saying that we are actually agreeing the motion 10 by Councillor Doig and McCartan as amended by Councillor Sharkey? Yes?
Yeah.
Agreed? Okay. We're on to item 17. We're back to item 17, I should say. And it's motion 7. Again, Councillor Andy Doig and Hood.
Okay. Okay, Provost, thanks very much. The upgrade and drilling of the A737, there's been many councillors, Provost, of all political stripes, past and present, I mean, who have campaigned alongside me on this issue. I think I've been one of the most consistent, but there's been previous councillors such as Councillor Chris Gilmer, Councillor Stephen McGee, Councillor Bill Binks has made an effort in that direction to try and gather together community campaigns about the issue, and had a measure of success. COVID has intervened, but there's been a great amount of all-party agreement about this in the past. But again, it's rather like earlier debates, like the Lochwinner train station upgrade. We seem to be hitting the buffers, if I can use a real term that Councillor Sharkey will appreciate, that we seem to be hitting the buffers. We're not moving forward. The Council's various reports have accepted that this is an issue. For example, in the Leadership Board September 2019, the 10-year Renfrewshire Economic Strategy flagged up, I quote, the issue of congestion on the A737 to and from North Ayrshire. And that's after, let's be clear, Provost, that is after the Dalry North Ayrshire section has been upgraded. Now, an upgrade to from the Lochwinner to Kilbarchan section would deal with that. Various board reports, including the reports in front of us here today, talk about the job opportunities of the Glasgow Airport investment area. Now, if my constituents in Johnstone, the villages, are to take advantage of these key opportunities, which are vital and necessary, I'd like to see more investment in West Renfrewshire, but these jobs are vital and necessary. They need to get there both quickly and safely, and that's sadly not the case at the moment. There's no less than 5 local community councils led by Howwood, but also including Kilbarchan, Johnstone, Lochwinnock and Brookfield community councils have a public and agreed position of backing the upgrade and safety reasons. We heard in a previous debate about the primacy of community engagement and community agreement. There's no issue that has greater community agreement than the need to upgrade the A737, fundamentally on safety reasons. We have the notorious Howwood Junction, which, as somebody who used to live in Kilbarchan at the Howwood end of the village, there used to be numerous ambulances. You used to hear them frequently going down to the Howwood Junction. It's a real black spot. And the tragedy seems to be for Transport Scotland is they won't act until somebody, do we need to have a number of fatalities, or do the fatalities need to get higher in order to get them to act? That's a dreadful indictment, I think, on Transport Scotland and their attitude. So I'll finish up on this, Provost. The cost of upgrade was estimated around 50 million in 2013. It'll obviously be much higher now. But as I said earlier, there's areas in Scotland, whether it has been Councillor McCartan, Liberal Lib Dem MSPs or SNP MSPs or Labour or Tory MSPs, it matters not. Other areas in Scotland, like the Borders and the Highlands, have gained significantly from Scottish Government infrastructure investment. And it seems to me that we are being left behind. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Doig. I've had messages from the other leaders saying that they all agree to your motion. Is that correct? No amendments? Okay. Councillor Andy Doig, motion 17 is agreed, unless Councillor Hood wishes to say anything.
I think Andy said it all.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, John. Okay, motion 7 is agreed by Council. And we're on to item 18 on the agenda. And it's motion 8 by Councillors Campbell and Patterson. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Provost. you want me to read out the text?
Michelle, can I just hold you a wee second there? It's just been raised with me. That's Councillor Sharkey's amendment to item. Oh no, we didn't have an amendment, Lillian. That was a previous item. Okay, ignore me. Councillor Jacqueline Campbell, sorry, Councillor Campbell. Forgive me, I'm getting a wee bit of a headache trying to deal with all of this.
Sorry. Would you like me to read out the text, the body of the text of the motion?
Yes, please. For my benefit as much for anyone else's.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. This council calls upon the Chief Executive and the Director of Children's Services to work with the Scottish Government, Education Scotland, COSLA and the teaching unions to produce and implement anti-racist teaching resources into the school syllabus, further to include education on Britain's use of its people across the British colonies in the Great Wars, to recognise the long-standing effects of colonialism around the world and to teach the facts in their entirety on the regrettable and significant part Britain played in the slave trade economy. Council also calls upon the Director of Children's Services to provide training and guidance to educators to discuss sensitive topics around racism, the role of Britain and its imperialist influence, and equipping them with the confidence and support needed to teach this necessary education.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Councillor Patterson.
I formally second and reserve the right, Provost.
Okay, do we have any amendments to motion 8?
Yes, Provost.
I'm sorry, folks, I have to apologise to you. I'm having a wee bit of an issue with the box that your amendments are being presented to me in. They're going really slow, so it's not your fault, it's my fault. I'm a wee bit behind.
Provost, I'd put an amendment up as well. It's Councillor Graham.
Yeah, Councillor Graham, I've actually got yours, so I've got yours first. So, Councillor Graham, do you want to read out your amendment, please?
I'll read it. I sent it to David Lowe. I think, did everyone get it? Well,
Yes, I think we have it, yeah.
I'll read it. I'll read the amendment out just for the people watching.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Council calls on the Chief Executive and Director of Children's Services to work with the Scottish Government, Education Scotland, COSLA and the teaching unions to produce and implement anti-racist teaching resources into the school syllabus. Further, to include the education on Britain's use of its people from across the British colonies in the Great Wars. Council also calls upon the Director of Children's Services to provide training and guidance to educators to discuss sensitive topics around racism. This Council also calls on the Chief Executive to ensure that the sacrifice of those from Britain's colonies, overseas territories and self-governing dominions who have served in our armed forces are recognised and included in the Acts of Remembrance organised by Renfrewshire Council. The Council recognise the positive and significant contribution by people immigrating to the United Kingdom from former British colonies, making the United Kingdom the modern multicultural country that it is today. Particular recognition should be given to the high number of people from black and ethnic minorities, many from former British colonies, working in our NHS and other frontline services during the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's the wording of the motion. Is it okay if I just say a few words on it?
Yeah, who's your seconder, Councillor Graham?
Seconder's Councillor McIntyre.
Okay. You want to speak to your amendment, your motion, sorry?
Yep.
Your amendment?
Amendment, yeah, thanks. I think the motion speaks more or less for itself. I'll make it quick. We recognise and are proud of our multicultural United Kingdom, Special recognition should be paid to the soldiers from the British colonies, overseas territories and dominions who fought in the Great Wars. Renfrewshire Council should work to recognise their sacrifice when our remembrance services are held. We also thank all of our country's health workers who are on today's front line, many of whom come from ethnic minority backgrounds. I would call on every councillor to unite and to send a strong message to our ethnic minority communities that they are welcome here and to commit to including them in our remembrance events. Thank you.
Provost, you're muted.
My apologies. I'm having a wee delay going on here. Councillor McIntyre, do you want to say anything at this moment?
Provost, I formally second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Okay, thank you. We also have an amendment from Councillor Jim Hart. Councillor, do you want to read out your amendment, please?
Provost, unfortunately, Jim Hart unable to do that. Councillor Sharkey will take that.
I apologise, Councillor Sharkey.
Sorry, okay. And I will second it if you see you're asking.
So the Labour amendment is by Councillor Jim Sharkey and seconded by Councillor Eddie Devine.
Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Sharkey.
My machine has similar delays to you. I imagine they're very similar models. Anyway, just to read out the amendment, which replaces everything. It's in recognising the sins of Britain's imperialist past, and in particular their role in the slave trade, this council acknowledges the work of anti-slavery campaigners such as Thomas Clarkson, Adula Aquino, Elizabeth Henrick, and Granville Sharp, to name but a few. The work of these campaigners and many others should be included in any educational resources and materials. Now, the reason that I'm putting this forward in place of the amendment and in place of the motion, and indeed the Conservative amendment, which we didn't have sight of, but includes the 2 points that we had difficulty with in terms of this motion. It refers in the motion to Britain's use of its people from across the British colonies. We would not accept that, and I doubt that the people in those colonies, in terms of their long and hard battles for independence, at any point consider that they were British Empire's peoples, right, for that. So it would fall just on that fact alone. But in the second paragraph, it discusses sensitive topics about racism. Now, I'm at a loss, right, to even imagine what the sensitive topic is there. Racism is wrong, and there's no need to be sensitive about it at all. It is wrong, and we should state it's wrong. And as far as I'm aware, in schools, it is taught it was wrong. It was certainly taught that it was wrong in the school that I went to, where we had that very famous diagram on the wall which showed the packing in of human beings on one of the West African slave ships, right? The same diagram which was in the very same history book that we were taught in that school, which taught us about slavery and taught us about the imperialist nature, right, of the British Empire. So, those teaching materials are already there, right? And perhaps there is a case, right, for reinforcing it amongst teachers. I may just have been lucky. It may just have been, that I had a particularly good history teacher, right, in this matter. But as I'm sure that my sisters, who all went to the same school year after year, because I have more than one sister, that they will be able to confirm that the same books were used and the same teachers taught the same subjects. And I'm always very, very suspicious of an argument that says, we didn't know this. Now, it's already been proved today that it's perfectly possible for a new piece of history to come forward and astound us, right? But in terms of the imperialist past of Britain, right, that is not up for debate. It is not sensitive, and we need to say that empire created sins, and those sins, right, we do not in any way support. Thank you, Provost.
Councillor Sharkey. Councillor Devine, do you want to say something at this time?
No, Provost, I'll reserve the right to come back if that's okay with yourself.
Okay, could I just ask Councillor Campbell if she's willing to accept any of the two amendments that have been presented?
Could I just ask for a point of clarification from Councillor Sharkey? If the word of that he'd, just because I know that he'd mentioned that he had issues with the use of its people, if that was to be removed and this was made an addition, would you accept that to what he's proposing?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't accept that.
Okay. Then I can't accept either amendment.
Okay.
Provost, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Kenny McLaren.
Thank you, Provost. I was hoping that we could come together as a full chamber and support this. Just a couple of comments on the amendments. It seems to be quite a turnaround from the Tories. Surely, was it not under Theresa May as Prime Minister they had bans saying go home and chasing people out the UK purely on the depending on their skin tone? And as for Councillor Sharkey, I noticed he made the comment about recognising former colonies in their battles for independence. Well, maybe I'd like to join our battle for independence. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McLaren. Councillor Eileen McCartan.
Sorry, Provost, I thought you were going to bring in somebody else first. Yes, I mean, I think the sentiment in the motion is absolutely correct. I think we absolutely need to ensure that people need to know what the British Empire did. We hear about all the good things that it did, but there's huge areas in this way that we need to ensure that we have the history of what went on. One of the concerns I often have is when we're talking about racism is that, and education, is that very often the racism shown to Irish people is phenomenal and has been phenomenal in this country over the years. And all I ask is that, you know, any information that is given out in terms of racism in general also includes the vehement racism that was put out towards the Irish in this country over the last 100 to 150 years. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor McCartan. Councillor Lisa Marie Hughes.
Thanks, Provost, and I hope Councillor Campbell doesn't mind me coming in here because I don't think anyone else in this meeting has a right to question her wording on this sort of motion. Of course, as a councillor, you have a right, but as someone who recognises people's histories and what we're trying to talk about, I do think Michelle is the one who's the expert here. I would pick up Councillor Sharkey's questioning of the word sensitive. I don't think there's a question here that we absolutely should have anti-racist practice and highlight it at every point. However, for the people who it is still a daily issue for them, who experience it every day, the picking through it is sensitive for them, and I think that's something we should be cognizant of.
Thank you, Lisa Marie. I think there might be someone else who wishes to ask a question. Give me a wee second. As I said, it's just operating a wee bit slow. No, I'm going to go to the seconders of the amendments in case they want to say anything before I ask Councillor Campbell to sum up. So, Councillor Devine, do you wish to come in at this point?
Yes, yes. Sorry.
Councillor Devine.
Provost, I'll leave it up to Councillor Sharkey. He's got something to say.
Yeah, I was trying to type it in there, but my typing skills aren't,
yeah, I know. I'm sorry, Councillor Sharkey. I'm a wee bit reluctant to let people in more than once now, given the time that we have.
I understand
you're
that, but
speaking on
I'm
behalf of
happy to
Councillor-
accept the offer from Councillor Campbell, right, if it's still on the table.
Okay.
For that, she accepts my amendments, an addendum to the wording that she put.
Okay. Councillor Campbell, are you okay with this? Yes? Well, it was you that asked for it anyway, wasn't it?
Yes, Provost. I think that I will explain myself when I come to speak to the motion, but yes, I will accept that.
Okay. So, Councillor McIntyre, do you wish to say anything at this time? Councillor John McIntyre?
Nothing further to add, thank you, Provost.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Councillor Campbell to sum up unless Councillor Patterson wants to come in.
No, Provost, I'm happy for Councillor Campbell to sum up, and I'm just pleased that, given the reflection that Councillor Sharkey and Councillor Campbell have come to an agreement, because I think it's important to send out a joint message on this issue. So well done to everybody on that one.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Campbell, I'm going to ask you to sum up on the motion as amended by, is it an addition or an amendment by Councillor Sharkey?
It will be an addition, Provost, and a slight amendment by myself to that those couple of words that I mentioned earlier in regard to Britain's use of its people. And that can be changed to further to include education on Britain's sorry, I just want to make sure I get this right for your wording on this one.
Yeah, it's just for the sake of the officers who are recording.
Further to include education across the British colonies forward.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay, that's fine. They agree with that. Okay, Councillor Campbell, do you want to go ahead then?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think today there's been so many examples of unconscious bias, ignorance, and to be absolutely honest about it, I'm so furious at the amount of white privilege and entitlement, and I share a chamber with you people. You should be ashamed of yourselves. And nicely, begin onto this motion. I feel passionate about this because I have dealt with racism through my whole life. I've experienced that hate despite the education that has been spoken about. We have had legislative changes for decades. Yet where is the cultural change that marries up with that? So I will not sit in this chamber and be lectured by any of my colleagues when I am the only person of colour in this chamber, which is not reflective of our communities. There is a need for anti-racist education. It's well overdue. When I was at school, yes, you had some basic stuff that you either took an interest to or you didn't. But it wasn't until I started asking curious questions that I realised how much more was missing. I'm biracial. I have a mixed background. I'm half white. Do you know how much of a conflict that sits with me? On the other side of me, I have an Eastern African background to Uganda, Kenya, the Seychelles and Mauritius. Our very flags have red in them to show that bloodshed, that pain and anguish that people have went through, so it is never forgotten. We should be teaching that because we had a role, and I say that from the other side of my background. And it's shameful that we don't. We do not learn of the impact of our own history and how that has rippled for nations which have been inflicted with this. We must give a voice to the unheard in our history. Historical accuracy is essential to understanding the full story. This includes slavery, to learn and understand. There's been an avoidance of addressing this properly for over 300 years, and now is the time for change. Saying sorry is not enough. We have had the ability to make a difference in our own communities, and that is what we should have been doing here today. Silence is ignorance. It's an insult to those who have been suppressed for too long, and each generation that has followed, including my own. That blood runs through my veins as much as it does my ancestors. stop hate, to stop bias, to stop ignorance, and to stop inequality in our local communities and to wider society, we must educate to eradicate racial discrimination. And that is why I have put this motion forward to this council. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Michelle. We'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Provost. A roll call vote. I've got a motion moved by Councillor Campbell, as amended by Councillor Sharkey's amendment, which is seconded by Councillor Patterson. An amendment moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor McIntyre. Members, please indicate if they're voting for Councillor Campbell's motion or Councillor Graham's amendment. Councillor Adam McGregor.
Motion.
Councillor Begg.
Amendment.
Councillor Bibby.
Motion.
Councillor Booth.
Amendment.
Councillor Brown.
Motion.
Councillor Burns.
Motion.
Councillor Jacqueline Cameron.
Motion.
Provost Cameron.
Motion.
Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
She's the worst herself, voting results back, hoping people pull out or whatever. So much for equality. Michelle, that's what Robert's saying about.
Well, I'm not pulling my name out until I find my result.
Kenny, we can hear you. Kenny, Max, we can hear you talking.
Kenny, we've just heard what you've said.
I think we've got to Councillor Davidson. I think Councillor Davidson's left the meeting. It's Councillor Devine.
Motion, and can I say to Councillor Campbell, Michelle, we stand with you. We have many differences politically, but we stand together in this.
Councillor Andy Doig. Councillor Doig.
Forgot to mute my mic. Not unmute my mic. Motion.
Councillor Audrey Doig.
Motion.
Councillor Don.
Motion.
Councillor Grady. Councillor Grady.
Councillor Grady, you're on mute. Oh, that's your
motion.
Councillor Graham.
Amendment.
Councillor Hart.
Motion.
Councillor Hood.
Motion.
Councillor Hughes.
Motion.
Councillor Kennedy.
Motion.
Councillor Kerr. Councillor Kerr.
I think Councillor Kerr's dropped off the meeting, Ken.
I'm just checking the list. It doesn't appear to be at the meeting any longer.
Okay, can we just check? Can we just halt then? I don't want him. Can somebody try and get hold of him to make sure that it's intentional and not a techie problem?
The call's been made to Councillor Kerr just now, Provost.
Thank you very much. Are you okay just to carry on just now, Ken?
I'll carry on with the roll call vote and we'll
Okay.
go to Councillor Kerr at the end.
Yeah.
We've got to Councillor Mackay. Councillor Mackay.
Sorry, my computer packed up there. Abstain.
Councillor James McLaren.
Amendment.
Councillor Kenny McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Max McLaren. Councillor McCartan.
Motion.
Councillor McCulloch.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Absolutely motion.
Councillor McGutt.
Motion.
Councillor McIntyre.
Amendment.
Councillor McNaughton.
Motion.
Councillor Mylett.
Motion.
Nicholson.
Motion.
Councillor Patterson.
Motion.
Councillor Rodden.
Motion.
Councillor Sharkey.
Motion.
Councillor Shaw.
Motion.
Councillor Sheridan.
Motion.
Councillor Steele.
Motion.
And Councillor Strang. Councillor Strang.
Oh, Jane, are you muted?
Yeah, I'm trying. Amendment.
Oh,
We've just got
Sanders
Councillor
wee
Kerr
dog.
outstanding now, Provost.
Okay, we'll just give it a wee second. Whose wee dog is barking?
Provost, Councillor Kerr's phone's going to his answering machine.
Okay. Okay, there's not much that we can do about it if we can't get a hold of him.
Do you want me to declare the vote, Provost?
Yes, please.
We had 31 for the motion, 5 for the amendment and 1 abstention, which means the motion's carried.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Move on to item 19. That's motion 9 by councillors Andy Doig and Eileen McCartan. Councillor Doig.
Okay, thanks very much, Provost. I'll read out the motion. Motion 9 is on the City Deal Cabinet reform, and it begins, this council recognises that clarity and transparency are crucial in the delivery of the City Deal project for Renfrewshire. Notes the concerns of the Accounts Commission's report, Scotland's City Region Growth Deals on City Deal governance. Believes that the convenership of the Glasgow Region City Deal Cabinet should rotate on an equal basis between the Glasgow City Deal local authorities. Believes that the Chief Executive Officers of the Glasgow City Deal local authorities should convene the Chief Executives Group on a rotational basis in conjunction with the rotation of the City Deal Cabinet convenership. And the final bullet point, calls for reform of the City Deal Cabinet's protocols to ensure that agreed City Deal projects can be changed with the approval of the relevant local authority. Provost, the report Scotland's City Regions and Growth Deals by Audit Scotland was published in January this year. Now they had a key concern. They complained that it's not clear why some City Deal projects are selected and others are not. The selection process is not transparent. It's not, the documents are not available. I think that has to change, Provost. Because we've had examples locally, the agreed projects, just to quickly recap for members, the 3 agreed projects around about 2014-15 for Renfrewshire were the Renfrew to Yoker Bridge project and I think the Glasgow, the Paisley to Glasgow link. That was essentially it. I think we only had the 2 projects. There was a 3rd project. Anyway, in February 2017, for example, there was a definite feeling, there was dubiety about whether the Renfrew Bridge link to Yoker was actually going to go ahead. In fact, in the Paisley Express in February that year, 2017, Derek Mackay, the MSP for Renfrewshire North West, questioned whether he could actually support the project going ahead. Now, my point about this is the bridge project did go ahead. I think there seemed to be a lot of, looking from the outside in, a lot of lack of community engagement and enthusiasm for the project in Renfrew, but it went ahead nonetheless. I think this is wrong in the sense that Glasgow City Council calls the shots under the protocols of the city deal. They permanently chair the cabinet, they permanently change the executive officers group, and I think that has to change. I think when the city deal proposals came up in August 2014, there was a special full council meeting because it was a very important development. Everybody, every party of every stripe in the chamber welcomed it. The SNP at that time did say, Councillor Brian Lawson, who was the group leader at the time, whilst he welcomed the city deal, he did say there was a lack of democratic oversight on the city deal proposals. Sadly, I think that element of it has came to pass, and I think we have to do better and we have to change that. And it's something we have to move forward with, Provost. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Andy. Councillor McCartan?
Yes, Provost, I'll just formally second.
Okay. Do we have any amendments? We have. Councillor Nicholson?
We've seen this amendment, this motion before, I think, and to be fair, in a sense, if that's the view of Councillor Doig and he wants that to be the view of the council, and the council agrees with that view, that's fine. But again, events have overtaken things here because the Glasgow City Regional Cabinet is reviewing all the items that he's listed in his motion. And that review is ongoing just now, and there'll be a report to the City Cabinet in October, I believe, on that. So the City Cabinet is responding to the report that he referred to. And again, on the fourth, I think it's the fifth bullet point about reform. I mean, our motion today, our amendment today is more about information about how it works, because no one authority owns the projects and no one authority owns the money allocated to that project. So it's not within the gift of a single authority to decide, we don't want to spend that on that project, we want to spend on this project here. The processes that are wrapped around the City Cabinet, which predated our administration as well, is pretty convoluted. I have to agree that, and we have had these discussions with all the leaders of the various councils as well about chair rotation, about moving around the regional area more. And recently we had a discussion about more powers that may be going towards the City Regional Cabinet, and that was a pretty robust discussion about that issue as well. So there's nothing in a sense of this motion will do anything which has not been done just now already. You know, so the council, I know the council officers have responded to the review that's going on. I've responded as a member of my view of how the City Cabinet works or doesn't work in certain areas, and it's perfectly viable for the council to believe that it holds a view as well. But what's listed there, as I said, is actually being done just now anyway. So it's slightly superfluous to what's happening with the City Regional Cabinet just now. As I say, the assurance framework side of it is the complicated part, because the money that the City Cabinet is actually spending is being spent on behalf of the UK government and the Scottish government. You know, we obviously as councils contribute in quite a bit to some of these projects, and we have 3 infrastructure projects in Renfrewshire, but the vast bulk of the money is UK and Scottish government money, and that's why the framework is so convoluted in a way about the decisions around that spend of that money, reviewing it, the Gateway Review. We successfully got through the Gateway Review recently as well, which releases more money from it. So it's quite a complicated system, and I can understand why people looking at it from outside will not quickly grasp how it works. But as I say, the motion today doesn't really achieve anything to that effect, except possibly if it gets agreed today, it would just go to the City Cabinet, and they're doing the review anyway. So my amendment today is just merely to lay out the informational facts about that, Provost. So it's whether Councillor Doig wants to accept my amendment or remove my amendment as an alternative to his motion. It's entirely up to yourself. Thanks.
Okay, who's your seconder, Councillor Nicholson?
I'll second, Provost. Councillor Patterson.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Andy? Do we have any other amendments before I move on? I don't see any more that have been posted over to Dave, so I'll just assume that there aren't any and ask Councillor Doig if he's willing to accept your amendment, Councillor Nicholson.
No, Provost, I'm sorry, I'm not willing to accept it. And if you like, I'll continue to sum up and explain in detail why. I've spoken earlier, and other councillors have in the chamber today, Provost, about the fact we wanted the, if you like, subsidiarity. We wanted decisions to be taken in the chamber rather than by council officers in the same terms. I think it's fair to say we want as much decision making and powers taken in Renfrewshire rather than necessarily in Glasgow. And let's be quite clear about this. There's no way Councillor Nicholson can get around this. Councillor Brian Lawson was entirely right when he said, and he predicted in 2014, there's a lack of democratic oversight here. Now, it's entirely right that the great city of Glasgow fights for what it perceives as its economic needs and its economic benefits. But so they don't have the right to necessarily overrule and ride roughshod over the 7 other local authorities in the city deal. And, you know, Councillor Nicholson's shaking his head. The Councillor Nicholson's shaking his head. I'll give you an example, Ian.
I'll mute now, Provost, sorry.
Well, you can mute if you like. I mean, I'm happy to support free speech.
Come on, children, stop your bickering.
The Leadership Board agreed in April 2018 to request the City Deal Cabinet to consider the upgrade of the A737. Johnson the Villages is the only part of Renfrewshire that does not have a dedicated city deal. Barrhead in East Renfrewshire has one, Paisley has one, Renfrew has one. Johnson the Villages do not, and that's a historic anomaly and a slight I've always tried to rectify. The Leadership Board agreed, there was all-party agreement at the Leadership Board. We wrote to Susan Aitken, can you please reassess the City Deal projects and consider, it was a perfectly responsible and reasonable request, Provost, can we consider the upgrade of the A737 as a project for Renfrewshire? It took Councillor Susan Aitken, the leader of Glasgow City Council, who is the convener of the Glasgow Region City Deal Cabinet, 7 months to respond to that letter. Now, frankly, Provost, is this a partnership or is it a takeover? We're happy for the City Deal money. The City Deals are obviously the way going forward, but I think I would agree with Audit Scotland. This is only the tip of the iceberg. Once again, the Scottish and UK governments, okay, they're putting in most of the money. That does not mean that we as an authority in Renfrewshire should need to give up our economic sovereignty, if you like, so that decisions, important decisions about infrastructure in Renfrewshire are made for the benefit of George Square and not for the benefit of our people.
Okay, can I know that I was bringing you in to sum up, Andy, but Councillor Alistair Mackay had a question and my screen was frozen. So that is me actually just seeing that he wanted to ask a question. So if you're okay with it, I'll bring Alistair in.
Yeah.
Thank you, Provost. I note Councillor Nicholson's statement that Councillor Doig's concerns are already being discussed. However, if Councillor Doig's concerns that are being discussed are ignored in the as a result of this consultation, then we're back to square one. If we approve Councillor Doig's motion, then we've got a fallback option already in place. So I think it might be a bit short-sighted just to say, well, it's being considered and assume that Councillor Doig's concerns will be accepted, because in all likelihood they might not be. So therefore, let us consider Councillor Doig's motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Okay, we'll go to the vote now.
Thank you, Provost. Roll call vote. The motion's moved by Councillor Andy Doig, seconded by Councillor McCartan. The amendment's moved by Councillor Nicholson, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Members, please indicate if they're voting for Councillor Doig's motion or Councillor Nicholson's amendment. Gregor.
Amendment.
Councillor Begg.
Motion.
Councillor Bibby.
Motion.
Councillor Binks.
Motion.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown.
Motion.
Councillor Burns.
Amendment.
Councillor Jacqueline Cameron.
Amendment.
Provost Cameron.
Amendment.
Councillor Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Devine.
Motion.
Councillor Andy Doig.
Motion.
Councillor Audrey Doig.
Amendment.
Councillor Dawn.
Amendment.
Councillor Grady.
Motion.
Councillor Graham.
Motion.
Councillor Hart.
Motion.
Councillor Hood.
Motion.
Councillor Hughes.
Motion. Amendment.
No, Provost, Councillor Hughes can't change now.
Yes, I can.
Got to take the first answer.
That's not true.
Councillor Kennedy.
Motion.
Councillor Mackay.
Motion.
Councillor James McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Kenny McLaren.
Amendment.
Councillor Mags McLaren. Councillor McCartan.
Motion.
Councillor McCulloch.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Amendment.
Councillor Scott.
Amendment.
Councillor McIntyre.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Amendment.
Councillor Mylett.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholson.
Amendment.
Councillor Patterson.
Amendment.
Councillor Rodden.
Excuse my Wayne's fighting in the background. Amendment.
Councillor Sharkey.
Motion.
Councillor Shaw.
Amendment.
Councillor Sheridan.
Motion.
Councillor Steele.
Amendment.
And Councillor Strang.
Motion.
Can I just ask Lillian to check the numbers? I've got 20 for the motion and 19 for the amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I've got, Ken.
Yeah. So 20 for the motion, 19 for the amendment. The motion is carried.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Ken, do you want to come in to say something on the previous item that we debated?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Promise, just apologise. The number I announced for the amendment on item 18, I announced as 5 when in fact it was 6. The result was 31 for the motion, 6 for the amendment and 1 abstention. So apologies for that.
Okay, that's You can amend that. That's agreed.
Sorry, Provost, I couldn't hear that. I don't know if anybody else could
Okay.
please.
Yeah, Eddie, I think someone has got their mic on again, so can I ask you all to turn your mics off, please? And if Ken could very kindly repeat what he said.
Yes, it was just to correct the announcement on the result of the vote on item 18. I'd announced that the vote was 31 for the motion, 5 for the amendment and 1 abstention, when in fact it was 6 votes for the amendment. It doesn't alter the result at all, but I just wanted to make sure that was accurately recorded.
Okay, thank you very much. Did everyone hear that? Yes. Thank you very much, Ken. Okay, we're now on to item 21, which is the notice of motion 11 by Councillors McCartan and Andy Doig. And this is about the realistic wage for social care workers, in which quite a number of councillors have intimated that they have an interest in. So if anyone has declared an interest in this item, that is a financial interest, therefore they must leave the meeting. Could they leave now? Okay, Ken, do you have a list of the councillors who declared an interest?
Provost.
Is there anybody left?
Provost, sorry, I had a bit of trouble unmuting there. I'll give you a note of the members who I noted as declaring a financial interest at the start of the meeting. It was Councillor Rawdon, Councillor Andy Doig, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Audrey Doig, Councillor Sharkey, Councillor Burns, and Councillor Montgomery. That's all the ones I have noted.
Provost, sorry, my interest is a non-pecuniary one.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sharkey. So is mine. Yeah.
I intend to stay for the meeting.
Yeah, okay. Okay, we'll just move on then. Eileen McCartan, Councillor McCartan, who is going to second your motion now?
I'm not certain.
Councillor Devine seconded the motion, Provost.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Eddie.
So, Eileen, do you want to read out your motion,
yes,
please?
Yes, okay. It's a realistic wage for social care workers. Council declares its deep felt appreciation and gratitude to social care workers in Renfrewshire who, since the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, are supporting the most vulnerable in society. Council believes it is vital that social care workers are given a realistic wage commensurate with their responsibilities and rising to that comparable with junior nurses. Council calls on both private and public sector providers of social care to work collectively to deliver that aim as soon as possible. Council welcomes the decision by the Scottish Government to review adult social care in Scotland with a view to establishing a national care service. Can I say, colleagues, we felt that it was important to raise the issue of carer payments at this time, and it certainly has raised considerable interest. Particularly in light of the huge contribution which carers have made over the last 6 months in Renfrewshire in trying to help people cope with the effect of COVID-19. We wanted first to acknowledge the amazing service that they have given. Secondly, we wanted to raise the issue of the very low pay which many carers receive. I know that in the motion, we have equated salaries to that of junior nurses. Perhaps we should have been clearer in speaking about the baseline of carers at that level and looking to their pay, to then pay upwards in accordance with their qualifications. If others in the council want to move any amendments on that basis, I don't think we would have any problems in supporting it, as many carers do have very substantial qualifications and do very specific work, which is almost medical or is medical in its practice. Finally, we wanted to note that the Scottish Government is talking about a review into the National Care Service. almost as in a parallel with the NHS as it was set up after the Second World War. And just as in the NHS, was had policy developed and carried out with cross-party support. For example, in that case, Lord Beveridge of the Liberals supplying the policy, and Oireann Bevan of the Labour Party implementing it. In that case, hopefully any development of the National Care Service could also be done with cross-party support. I ask you to support this motion, possibly with any suitable amendments which might be presented. Thank you.
Provost, you're muted.
My apologies, I was muted. I forgot to unmute myself. Eddie, do you want to say anything just now?
I'll be very quick, Provost. I think most of us are getting to that time of the day where we should have a sleep. But anyway, I'm happy to second this and be asked to second it by Councillor McCartan. That I don't see how we, in this day and age, after what we've gone through the past 6 months and probably for at least another 6 months, that anybody can seriously argue against better paying conditions for social care, not just social care workers, but in this instance we're talking about social care workers. So I'm very happy to second this, and I hope everybody can support it. As Eileen said, even if she might accept a small addition or taking something away from it that suits, but I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Devine. I think we have an amendment from Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Nicholson, I think you've posted your amendment directly in the group chat, so could you read it out, please?
Hold on a second. It's slowing down quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'll read it off another page, if that's okay. Let's see what it is. Let's see. Okay. It's really in relation to paragraph 2. That's the bit that was causing us a bit of struggle. I think Councillor McCartan identified that. Renfrewshire Council believes that there should be parity of salaries across all sectors where social care roles deliver vital services to our communities. The social care sector covers a wide variety of settings and services, and this is also reflecting the differing level of roles undertaken by social care staff. Council therefore calls on Scottish Government and COSLA to work collectively to deliver a review of all social care roles, including salary structures, similar to that to the adult social care review. I think, as I say, I think Councillor McCartan recognised herself that the way the middle section is worded doesn't make it clear it's about frontline social care staff, because when you say social care workers, there's a huge amount of people in there who help deliver social care. You know, IT support, admin support, van drivers, everybody who provides that service is in there. And again, there needs to be an understanding, and I know I'm preaching from the financial side of this as well, that I think it's right, and I think our group thinks it's right, they should review social care staff and the pay structures they've got. And I'm not actually quite sure how Councillor McCartan gets to junior nurse, because I don't think it's fair to equate the roles that somebody does in another sector to somebody else somewhere else, i.e. nursing, for example, because their pay structure is entirely different, and there's different levels of training involved, there's different grades involved, there's, you know, so I think that's the middle section that's really causing the issue here. And I think we all agree in principle that there should be a fundamental review and change about the pay structures for social care staff, because bear in mind the council also we procure a huge amount of social care work as well through the third sector and through the third voluntary sector and private care homes. So we pay for all that, and we're happy to pay for all that so that people get a good wage based on a salaried structure that they're in. But that will have to come from, I suspect, the Scottish Government as well to back that up. So whilst the council can decide which way it wants to go in this particular issue, I think there needs to be a bigger look at what that would mean by providing a base starting salary for social care workers, because as I say, there's hundreds of people working social care. They're all starting at SVQ 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and they're all in different pay scales, different grades, different levels of work. So I think that's the issue here, is that the second paragraph, Provost, and that's why we've put the amendment up today. Thanks.
Who's your seconder, Ian?
It's myself, Provost, Councillor Cameron.
Jacqueline, do you want to say something just now?
Will I come in at the end or just now?
No, you can come in just now if you want.
No, just a brief point, just to say absolutely support the sentiment of Councillor McCartan's motion. And, you know, I don't think we'll ever again call social care staff unskilled workers, and we really do appreciate how much support they've given us through the pandemic and that we're still in the midst of. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Jacqueline.
Provost,
yes?
Provost, I'm more than happy to accept that amendment.
Okay, Eileen. So the motion is now as amended by Councillor Nicholson.
Yes,
seconded
absolutely.
by Jacqueline Cameron.
Yep.
Aye. Hang on.
Okay, James McLaren, did you wish to say something? Or do you have a Councillor Andy Doig? I can hear you. I thought you had an interest in this.
Provost, I don't have an amendment. I just wanted to highlight that through the IJB, I've commented on the difficulty in recruiting carers in the past, and there is a backlog of, or there are plenty of vacancies needing to be filled. So if we can do something to help, that would be great.
Okay, thank you, James. Okay, so the motion is adopted by the Council, motion 11, by Councillors McCartan and Devine, as amended by Councillor Ian Nicholson and Jacqueline Cameron. So that's agreed by Council, it looks like. So if we could get everyone back in again. It seems like Andy is back in already, Andy Doig, because I heard them talking.
I pushed the wrong button. My tea skills best.
Standards Commission.
Go for it, Andy.
Need somebody to keep Paul company, don't we?
Okay, we need everyone to rejoin the meeting, and I think a message has just been sent.
I'm back, Provost.
That's good.
Back, Provost.
Thank you. This is just so alien, this process, isn't it?
But the more we do it, the better we'll get at it, Lorraine.
I'm not doing this again.
Well,
that's not nothing, Provost.
I think you will be.
Oh dear.
Oops.
You know that wee saying that says confused, you will be.
Can I just say, Provost, we really have to come up with a better idea than 7 hours in a meeting.
You know what, Eddie? This is what it used to be like.
Aye, you're
right. That's enough of that. You.
Right, back to the good old days. Not
21 years ago, we were frequently in meetings until the evening. So.
Well, if you order the fish suppers, we'll carry on.
I've still been in the record
in?
meeting, Provost.
Hmm?
You were in the regular functions board that started at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we were still going at 7:45 at night.
It was murder.
Absolutely shocking.
Murder. Okay, is everyone back? we should have Audrey back, John Shaw.
August, if you can just give us a quick minute, we're just running through the list just now.
Okay. I think Alison has left the meeting, Alison Dowling, and I think maybe Colin has too. Carol-Ann Davison has, and Kevin Montgomery definitely has. I don't know about Scott. Did Scott Kerr come back into the meeting earlier? Did anyone notice if Scott came back in?
It would appear Councillor Kerr's having an issue with his IT, Provost, but we've tried to call him and we're not getting an answer on his phone.
Okay.
Councillor McLaren did draw attention to it in the group chat, but we have tried calling him and we're not getting an answer.
We can't do anything about that. If we had managed to get him on the phone and determined that he was having an IT problem, we could have adjourned for a wee bit to get him back. But if we don't know what's going on...
Councillor Kerr's just contacted me. He was kicked off and he's been struggling to get back on.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Okay.
Could you send him a message then saying that we've tried to contact him on his phone?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Provost, there's a message in the chat box or whatever you call it. It says Scott Kerr got kicked off the meeting and is trying to come back. Can IT assist, please? I don't know if somebody's seen that already.
Okay.
They've just said they've been trying to contact him for some time.
He's not answering his phone, apparently.
Yeah.
Provost, can I ask Councillor Hood what time the Rangers game starts at today?
No, you can't.
Because we're getting a bit close to the wire here, folks.
Get that notion out
It's
of your
8
head.
o'clock. It's been
Well,
changed to 8 o'clock.
I would just like to point out that it was the councillors who submitted all of these motions.
Aye.
Yep.
Aye, well, it wasn't any Rangers supporters, I'll tell you
That's
that.
why we're still here.
It's all right. You'll make the second half, Andy.
Give Andy Doig a gag, you know.
Okay, if we
Sorry, did you say that, Eileen?
Never. I didn't say such a thing.
Okay.
That's
Could
But I just don't get anywhere.
3 months worth of press releases.
Oh my goodness, this is...
3 weeks, more like.
Who else is having connection problems after coming back in?
It looks like Emma Rodden's having problems as well. There's a message just come up there.
Okay, Councillor Burns has been called. Is Councillor Audrey Doig here? She back?
In the corner.
Yeah, I've got different. I must have a different screen up from than you have.
Audrey's got guarding the fridge.
Okay, we're just trying to get. I would say we've maybe got about a minute or two if anyone really needs to go a place.
I'd like to cut the grass before it gets dark.
I need to go a place, but not in the way you mean.
Councillor Binks, we're still getting Councillor Kerr's answer phone. If you have a different number for him, could you ask him to call one of the IT tech numbers, please?
Okay, we're trying to make contact again with Councillor Kerr.
I will do that, yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Binks. And have we got everyone back in that left the meeting? Does anyone even know who left the meeting? John Shaw is here. Councillors Kenny and Mags are here. Stephen is back. Audrey's back. Andy's back. Oh. My screen keeps freezing. This is most annoying.
Provost, may I venture a question?
Certainly.
May I venture a question?
Certainly.
Obviously, today's highlighted certain inadequacies with regard to holding a full council meeting using this medium. Could you tell me if you'll be looking into altering the format in the future?
Yes, we already are, Alistair. We're doing that at the moment. We're looking at all possibilities so that we can still have our meetings. But I would say that today isn't ideal by any manner of means.
It's ideal about just now, except for what my wife just brought me home.
Oh, you need to show.
I think you can see it. It's not flashing up. Hang on a minute.
What is it?
It's two boxes away.
Right.
Okay, can I have someone confirm that everyone's back in that left the meeting, or that at least muted or placed an interest? Ken, are
Provost,
you?
as far as I can see from the list, other than Councillor Kerr, who we've established has got difficulty and we're having a problem contacting, I can't see anyone that's missing who was here before the previous item.
Okay, that's fine then. We'll just move on. To item 22. And this is the item that Councillor Dowling actually declared an interest in, but we lost her. I did intimate that I would let you know which item that was when we got to it. She wasn't going to participate in the debate anyway on this item, nor take part in the votes. But this is the item that she declared an interest in at the beginning of the meeting. So item 12, motion 12 was by Councillors Patterson and Jacqueline Cameron. Councillor Patterson.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I'll just run through the text of the motion. I'm hoping that we can reach an agreement in this and progress this one fairly swiftly. So it's in relation to the Independent Care Review, and the Council welcomes the publication of the final report of the Independent Care Review and acknowledges the findings, commits to engaging with all relevant stakeholders and, most importantly, care-experienced young people, including the Renfrewshire Children's Champions Board, to discuss necessary changes to ensure that the promise is kept and that our children and young people grow up to be loved, safe and respected, and that they realise their full potential. Agrees that following engagement, a delivery plan be brought to a future Education and Children's Service Policy Board for the consideration of elected members. I don't plan to expand much more on that, other than many councils have moved similar motions about adopting the promise and the findings of the Independent Care Review. I'm proposing we do that, but I think we should be doing it in tandem with our looked after and care experienced young people rather than doing it to them. We want to hear what they think about the promise and the Independent Care Review, and we'll take that on board when we're building the delivery plan, which will then be brought back to elected members for their input. However, if any elected members want more involved in the process, they can do so. I know Councillor Carol Ann Davidson, who isn't at the meeting anymore, does a lot of work with the Champions Board and other organisations, so certainly I'll be extending the invite to anybody that wants to become involved in that process. But other than that, I would just ask for support for the motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Your seconder is Jacqueline Cameron.
Yes.
Okay, Jacqueline, do you want to say anything just now?
Yeah, just a brief line, Provost. Just to point out that Who Cares Scotland produced a report showing the impact of COVID on care experienced young people and found that they were disproportionately affected in terms of feeling isolated and anxious. So yeah, just welcome the findings of this inquiry and work with Jim in the future.
Okay, thank you, Jacqueline. We don't have any notification of amendments so far. So I'm assuming that there aren't any, but I must ask formally if there are any. None? Okay, we'll agree and move on. We've agreed item 22, which was motion 12. Thank you, members. And we're on to item 23, which is motion 13 by councillor. Some of these dogs.
It was me, it's the dog, sorry.
We're at motion 13, Councillor Hughes, and it's Councillor Dawn and Councillor McEwen. Councillor Natalie Dawn.
Thanks, Provost. I'll just read out the motion and then I'll speak briefly on it. Council notes the support and engagement of our local communities and the continued success of the Team Up to Clean Up campaign. Council thanks the many local volunteers who have continued to litter pick throughout the period of lockdown. These dedicated and committed litter picking heroes, while adhering to social distancing guidelines, have played their part in not only raising the profile of community volunteering, but in sending a clear message that everyone has a role and a responsibility in keeping Renfrewshire's environment clean. So yeah, I just want to speak briefly. It's been a long meeting. This is the first real opportunity I think the council has had to say a real thanks to all the Team Up volunteers for their hard work during lockdown. One of the things that I found really noticeable during lockdown was the lack of litter and the lack of roadside litter we saw. And coupled with the effort of our amazing volunteers, Renfrewshire was looking absolutely brilliant. And even when the council weren't actually actively promoting litter picks, that didn't stop our volunteers, they kept going. Even now we're in the middle of our Spotless September challenge and the effort of them, they're still going strong. It's amazing. So can I just take this opportunity to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Team Up to Clean Up is just going from strength to strength. I say that all the time, but it really is. I'm sure I speak for many of us when I say your efforts and dedication are so appreciated. Normally at the end of the Spotless September challenge, we'd be planning a thank you event for all the volunteers. And obviously at this time, due to the pandemic, it's not safe or practical to do so. This will be a priority. I want to assure volunteers that we want to recognise and reward all your efforts. And just on a wee last note, no matter what you think of Team Up to Clean Up, there is no denying that the campaign itself, it's turned into a community on its own. People have made new friends, people have made new hobbies, and now it's helped people through what was a really difficult and isolated time for them. So I don't think anyone can fault that. So please just join with me in extending a huge thanks to all these selfless, amazing people. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor Dunn. Councillor McEwen?
You won't be surprised to know that I'll be seconding this.
Okay.
So I'll formally second it and reserve the right to come in.
Okay, Councillor McEwen, thank you. I have received a notification that there is an amendment from Councillor Sheridan. Councillor Sheridan, who is your seconder?
Councillor Devine.
Councillor Devine. Okay, if you want to go ahead, Councillor Sheridan, with your read out your amendment, please.
Yeah, Provost. I won't labour the point, Provost, but you sought to lecture me earlier on about my commitment and responsibilities to my constituents. Just to let you know that I'm still here, but others are not. So I hope you spread that same advice to those who are not here. But just on it's your job to lecture me. Anyway, on the amendment, this council acknowledges that under Section 89 of the Environmental Protection Act 1990 and the subsequent Code of Practice on Litter and Refuse, in brackets Scotland 2018, it is the liability of the council to ensure that their land and the land that they are responsible for is kept clear of litter and refuse and that roads are kept clean. This council respects people's choice to volunteer within their communities. However, it rejects the direction of travel currently being pursued by this SNP administration to replace council employees with volunteers, thereby placing the burden of keeping communities clear of litter onto the residents. And I say, Provost, that this Team Up to Clean Up, it was a project, I understand, that was started in primary schools on an educational basis to learn youngsters not to throw litter in the street and indeed in the playground. That project then graduated, excuse the pun, out into the communities. And I'll put some context in that. I was recently at a local meeting where there were senior pupils who were giving us a presentation about what they're doing at school. And part of that presentation was what they were doing in the communities in terms of litter picking. And at the end of the presentation, I asked the senior people if indeed the children or the young people, the young men and women who are asked to volunteer to pick up litter in their free period, if that was actually volunteering. And they looked at me and they said, it's expected of them. Now, I don't think parents send their kids to school to litter pick, not when they're paying significant council tax increases for that service to be delivered by Renfrewshire Council employees. And I think it's a bit unfair to have people in the community, and I fully respect if people want to go out and volunteer, that's entirely up to them. But I think it's unfair at a time when we are telling our employees or asking them to volunteer their jobs, and then asking people in the communities to fill that gap, and therefore the burden falls on community, therefore council abdicating responsibility to carry out that function. And I'm hearing anecdotal evidence as well that this project is now moving on to grass cutting, and people are being told, why don't you cut your own grass rather than wait for the council to come and do it? So, whilst I welcome people who want to volunteer, and both the previous speakers speak very highly of what I'm doing, and I don't disagree, but we need to understand the word of volunteer. People should be not placed in a position where this young man said it's expected of them. So I would leave it at that, Provost. And I wouldn't sort of bang the clarinets just yet. There's an awful lot of people who are unhappy with the state of their community. I hear Councillor McEwen saying that, oh, everything is wonderful. Everything is wonderful. I don't see it that way. And the people that I speak to in my community don't see it that way. And I'll conclude by saying this, Provost. Councillor Riddy Devine's assessment earlier on about the role of this administration and how they try to shut down any criticism whatsoever, I think is absolutely spot on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I want to apologise if you felt as if I was giving you a lecture. My previous words were not directed only at you, but at all councillors, simply pointing out our responsibility as we are paid from the public purse to represent our communities, which means turning up at meetings. It was not a personal slight on you. Okay, Councillor Devine, do you want to speak, or do you want to wait to come in later?
No, I'll speak just now if it's okay, Provost.
Yeah, sure.
Like everybody else, we applaud the volunteers who come out and clean up the bits and pieces that they're doing. It's great that they do. However, that cannot be seen as it's their job to do. They're there to pick up little bits here and there. The council, that's our job. As Councillor Sheridan said there, we're asking them, I think it was 5% we put up the council tax this year. And I often get, and I'm sure I can't believe that you don't get that, if we're not cutting the grass, if we're not cutting the hedges, if we're not lifting the litter or emptying the bins, am I going to get a rebate on my council tax? Well, the answer to that one is no. So, and when I heard, I think it was, I'm not sure, so I won't mention the name, but one of the councillors said that Renfrewshire is spotless. That's a joke. Renfrewshire is certainly not spotless, so we need to actually have a good look round. That's not what I'm seeing.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Provost. I sometimes think that we shoot ourselves in the foot with regard to this team up to clean up. It was last night that I was approached by some volunteers who had collected a lot of green rubbish, weeds and things like that, and put them in the green waste bags. And they were left lying, and a member of the public had volunteered to take these green bags of green waste to the amenity site. But it was because he was doing it with a pickup truck, he was told it would be deemed commercial waste and he couldn't leave it. Even though he explained what it was and that it was in council green waste bags, they still refused to let him deposit the rubbish. So on one hand, we're encouraging people to team up to clean up, and on the other hand, we're saying, well, you can only do it according to our rules. So inconsistency.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. I'm sure that the issue of the green bags being uplifted will be addressed by either Councillor McEwen or Councillor Dawn when they come to speak again. I'd like to bring in Councillor Adam McGregor.
Thank you, Provost. Can you hear me okay?
Thank you.
Yep. I think Councillor Sheridan's missing the spirit of this motion. You know, we wanted to acknowledge the extra 300 volunteers that have actually signed up during lockdown, Councillor Sheridan. So, you know, there's nobody's been forced into this. A lot of people think it leads to good citizenship, you know, therefore that's why we take our children out, so we teach them a different path, not to throw away rubbish. I would like to highlight and thank the chap again, you know, who lifted 200 bags from Stanley Reservoir. And I saw on the Team Up to Clean Up page yesterday, another chap lifted 22 shopping trolleys out of the Clyde yesterday beside Introbury Head. So I just would like to thank that, just bring that to their attention. And that's all I've got to say. I hope everybody gets behind the spirit of this motion and thanks the community for what they were doing.
That was the same people who lifted the shopping trolleys, Councillor Adam McGregor. But I hope the council give them as much assistance as they possibly can to do their bits, because that's what they want to do their bit. They only want support. They don't want to anything more than that. Okay, I'm going to bring in now Councillor Nicholson. Okay, can someone's got their mic on? I don't know whether that is Councillor Nicholson or not.
No, that's me now, Provost.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say, it didn't take too much searching on the internet. Can I just read this small paragraph here? This is from 2012. Green-minded teenagers took to the streets of Erskine last week to help brighten up their town.
Ian, can I stop you, please? Someone else is talking, get their microphone on. Can I ask everyone to put their mics off, please? Thank you. Try now, Ian.
Right, thanks. It's just a quick wee paragraph in the newspaper article from 2012, and it says, green-minded teenagers took to the streets of Erskine last week to help brighten up their town. The eco-conscious group embarked on a clean-up and went out and about the town's Bargarin area, wielding bin bags and litter-picking equipment provided by Renfrewshire Council staff. They were joined by workers from the Renfrewshire Warden Service, coaches from the area's award-winning Street Stuff youth team. The event was also attended by Councillor Jim Hart, the convener of Renfrewshire's Council Environmental Infrastructure Board, and Councillor Eddie Devine, the Council Street Stuff champion. So when we're talking about litter picking and you're trying to lay it someplace with regards to starting schools or whatever, it actually went ahead under the previous Labour administration and by the conveners and by Councillor Devine. So we welcome the fact that Councillor Devine came to Erskine and helped get the teenagers litter picking. And the people I know who litter pick in Erskine, I don't know what community Councillor Sheridan's talking about, maybe his ward, Linwood. But in Erskine, the people love litter picking and they don't see it as replacing council services. They do it because it's social. They do it because it helps their mental health. They do it because they enjoy getting about. And they do it mostly because it's volunteering and mostly because it's contributing to their community. And that's something we as a council should be supporting totally. I mean, I know there's lots of councillors on this forum who litter pick. I mean, I never understood. I go out walking my dogs. For years I did it. And I didn't realise I could litter pick at the same time I was walking the dogs. I mean, my wife thinks I'm multitasking now. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's volunteering is the word that's here. We're not compelling anybody to do it. We're not saying if you don't do it, your grass isn't getting cut or your litter isn't getting picked. That's not the case. It's an add-on with a lot of social benefits, as I say, and it's something that's been building up within Renfrewshire Council. And I'll happily admit it went on clearly since 2012. That's just a casual search through the internet. And we built upon that because there's a desire out there for the community to do it. And so this mantra we're hearing now, it's about replacing jobs. That is not the case, because if we don't get litter picking in communities, they will be litter picked as part of the council's programme. And as litter picking goes on, supporting all the litter pickers, because they decide and choose where they want to go. But the council's programme of litter picking has to be there to support all the places that should be getting litter picked on a day-to-day basis anyway. So this conflation of two different things isn't, to my mind, working very well, because we should be supporting people to be community-minded and to be active in their communities. And I really don't see what's wrong with that picture. As I say, in the Erskine and Shannon ward, the people love to do it. They're self-motivated. They go out themselves, and then they're on Facebook telling Nicola Drummond, the staff, where they left all the bags everywhere. It's actually quite emotional to see that, because people are taking pride in their communities and they love the sense of achievement they get from it as well. So thanks, Provost. That's all I had to say on it.
Thank you very much, Ian. We have a question from Councillor Hood.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
John, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, I hear you now.
Right, thank you. It's more a sort of technical question that I'd like somebody to answer for me, especially now that we've got there's areas where they're going out and cutting the grass. Do the people who do that for us, along with the litter pickers, need public liability insurance, or does the council cover the public liability insurance for that?
Okay, I'll ask Gordon if Gordon is still here. Director.
Hi, Provost.
Hi, Gordon.
Yeah, the council has got its core grass cutting programme, and that doesn't intermix directly with the Team Up to Clean Up campaign. If there still happens to be a Team Up to Clean Up campaign in a location where the council has got some of its workers, then I think it's already been touched on by some of the members. We look to collect that rubbish that they've collected and take that away, and obviously for in that area, that makes it easier for us as a service to do so. So the two aspects work separately to start with, but obviously the council workforce supports by uplifting the refuse that's collected when they've notified us of where and when, and we'll look to always support that.
Okay, thank you, Gordon. John, do you want to come back in?
Yes, please. That's more what happens if somebody has an accident, like somebody's cutting the grass and a stone hits a car, or which you'll probably find out later on, or if somebody is out picking up litter and they have a fall and they injure themselves doing this work. Is that the responsibility of the person that's doing it, or is that the responsibility of the council?
Gordon, do you know?
Yeah, just on the grass cutting first, Councillor Hood, we're not asking the public to cut any of the council's grass estate. In relation to areas that are being litter picked, if it's been organised via the Team at the Clean Up and the community protection team, then obviously they'll undertake a risk assessment to ensure the safety of all involved in that, so that another pick is being done. It's not being done in an area that's deemed to be unsafe to do so.
Right, thank you. Sorry, who's
sorry, Provost, it's Alan Russell here.
Hello, Alan.
Hi, Provost. Just picking up specifically on Councillor Hood's point, if it would help just to clarify the insurance situation for him, because I think that's what he was referring to.
That would be great if you could do that.
Just to be clear, Councillor Hood, if if a volunteer's working with the council formally under a scheme such as a clean-up campaign, they are covered under the council's insurance as though they were an employee, if that helps clarify matters for you.
Does that include what's got a damage to property? Because I have got somebody that was out litter picking that's damaged a car and they've been sent an £800 bill.
Yeah, it depends on the particular circumstances involved, the same as it would with an employee. I think I'm aware of that particular case. Might have corresponded with you before, but I'm happy to give you any advice out of the meeting, Provost.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Binks wants to come in. Councillor Binks, and Councillor McCartan must leave as she has a health appointment at 5:15. So thank you, Eileen, for joining.
Thanks very much. Sorry, I have to leave. Bye.
Oh, that's okay. Councillor Binks.
Thank you, Provost. We've gone all round the mulberry bush with this actual motion. I think we should treat it for what it really is. And it's just a thank you to all the volunteers and leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Binks. Councillor Campbell.
Hear me now?
Councillor Campbell, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Mic issues again. No, just I want to thank Councillor Don and Councillor McCune for bringing this to the full council, and I just agree fully with what Councillor Binks has said there. This is about saying thank you to everyone, and as a mental health practitioner myself, I would just like to see how much of a benefit it is for everyone's mental welfare and their well-being being out in the open in the fresh air, and it's been an opportunity for me to engage with constituents as well to discuss issues, because I've not been able to do the face-to-face surgeries. So there are benefits to all councillors taking part in the team clean up effort as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shaw.
Thanks, Provost. I just wanted to shine a light on some of the hypocrisy that's been shown here by some of our Labour colleagues, and just quote another news story from the 19th of June 2013, talking about a new drive has been launched to encourage Renfrewshire residents to play their part in helping the area look its best. The council's Do Your Bit campaign aims to get residents to think about things they do, big and small, to help improve the local environment. To officially launch the campaign, an event was held in Renfrew's Kitlingneuk Park, attended by representatives from the council and its partners. Council staff were joined by around 30 primary 5 pupils from Kitlingneuk Primary, plus staff from the police and fire service. St Mirren player Paul Dumnett and Connor Newton also popped along to lend a hand to the tidy up effort. Councillor Eddie Devine, convener of Renfrewshire's Council and Environment Board, said, "The aim of your Do Your Bit is to get people thinking about what they can do to make the area a more pleasant place to live, visit and do business. Do Your Bit is about asking people to support the work of the council, by having pride in and taking care of their local areas and helping to improve them for the benefit of everybody. Any schools, employers or community groups who have an idea for a clean-up or environmental improvement project, could that be like grass cutting, should get in touch." What is he talking about now? It's just political point scoring now, petty political point scoring. We should be thanking these volunteers and leaving it at that. And can I also point out, we were talking about fly tipping. Councillor Devine was responsible for the biggest increase of fly tipping in our history when he shut the dumps, when he was in charge of it. So let's not forget about that. I didn't shut the dumps. Well, let's ask the people about that. Okay, thanks, Provost.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Rodden.
Thanks, Provost. Just a point of clarification, not to get too pedantic, but Councillor Hood's comment about public liability, that one of the examples he gave was if somebody fell and hurt themselves, that wouldn't actually be covered under public liability. Public liability covers third-party injury and third-party property damage. It would be employers' liability, which Alan Russell has very helpfully told us is covered while someone is carrying out a litter pick.
Thank you, Councillor, for that clarification. Councillor McEwen.
Thanks, Provost. Not for 1 minute did I expect such negative comments from the opposition. I am so distraught at that. Bear in mind, Councillor Sheridan, this is the community and the council working together, and that should be praised. And another bonus of Team Up to Clean Up is that we're able to go into private land as well and pick up litter. I am absolutely, as I've already said, delighted to second this motion. My admiration for everybody, and I mean everybody, community, council, everybody, for being involved in Team Up to Clean Up. When we started this venture back, as I thought, 2017, but I'm now reminded that it was actually 2012. Little did we know how big and successful this movement was going to be. So successful that despite the very obvious problems associated with COVID, since March of this year, our numbers have increased, and listen, Councillor Adam McGregor, to nearly 400 members. Thanks to everyone who's worked tirelessly while keeping social distancing in place. Thank you for endlessly working towards changing the culture of some who think nothing of dropping litter and fly tipping in many of our beautiful walks and rivers in Renfrewshire. When we started along this path, we knew things wouldn't change overnight. And because of the determination for all of us to keep going, I know our message is getting across. Do you know something? I take even greater delight when I hear our children saying it's bad to drop litter, as it harms our environment, it endangers wildlife, and it pollutes our seas and rivers. That's when I know that we need to keep going, and change will come, as these children are our next generations. So yes, thanks to everyone for all your wonderful volunteering, and I look forward to seeing you soon, because I get out there as well. I know how important it is. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor McEwen. I have Councillor Steele who wants to come in.
I'll keep it very brief. Provost, I completely agree with everything my colleagues and, in fairness, Councillor Binks has said. I just wanted to point out that not only is it good in and of itself, litter picking meetings are an absolutely superb way for communities where there isn't a great deal of civic engagement to get engaged. It's a very easy, non-threatening, non-intimidating first thing to do, where you can get people out and about. They maybe go on and form a TRA, they maybe go on and do other community groups, but they really form a community and they get that civic identity going. I just can't believe anybody's got a downer on it. I think it's great, and I'm delighted to see this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Councillor Audrey Doig.
Thanks, Provost. Yous are all well behind the times. I started litter picking with the community way back in 2009 when Linwood Active got together, and the first thing they done was to do litter picking. And the way around it, Councillor Hood, was we actually took insurance out for our group to go litter picking, and we did risk assessments on all our litter picks the day before we actually done them. So that's the correct and health and safety way to go about it. The other thing is that yeah.
Sorry, Audrey, can I interrupt you? There's someone there's interference coming from somewhere. Could I just ask you
Councillor Sharkey's left his mic open.
Once again to check your mics, and if I could ask Councillor Audrey Doig to continue.
Could I also say, Councillor Sheridan was referring to some people in Houston who decided that they were going to basically cut their grass on their own fence line or roundabout. That was their own decision. It was not forced by anybody or anything to do with that. It was because the grass cutting wasn't getting done during COVID-19, and they took that on themselves. They did not ask the permission of council to do anything about that, and on their own head be it, basically doing that. And can I say that there are several groups in all the villages that I represent who are going out every week to do litter picking and benefiting not only their local areas, but they're doing putting in flowers and bushes and things like that to make the area better. So it's not just growing from litter picking, it's growing to basically benefit the community as a whole. And I totally support it 110%.
Councillor Burns? Councillor Burns?
Thanks, Provost. Just a quick couple of comments. The Team Up to Clean Up has been a great success. It's award-winning. It's got the Clumps Big Mess book that every child got across Renfrewshire, all the primary kids. Keep Scotland Beautiful behind the campaign, and you're actually starting to see a lot of businesses now taking part as well. Overall, it's a success. The council been out, a lot of the officers. I know one of the environment staff, Gail Schooler, has been in every ward and came to nearly enough every clean-up. So well done to everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We've a Councillor Shaw, did you want back in?
I didn't promise, sorry, I'd done both.
Okay, sorry, that must have been a mistake. Okay, Councillor Devine, do you want to say, did you second the motion? Yeah. Sorry, the amendment. Councillor Devine.
Could I just say that I'm very happy to accept the praise from all my SNP colleagues for starting this all out in 2012. And could I also say to Councillor Shaw, I know he's a bit well, I was going to better not say that. I know it might be a bit behind the times, but can I just re-emphasise, no dumps were ever closed and no dumps were ever going to be closed. So many times you could say that as many times as you want, you can't change the truth. And I could say to Councillor Nicholson, you mentioned that myself and Councillor Hart were in Erskine. Where were you in at that time, Councillor?
Okay, thank you, Eddie.
So I'm not finished. I'm not finished. What I want to say, when people look back at this, they'll actually see and be able to hear that myself and Councillor Sheridan actually praised the team up to clean up volunteers. So at least some this coordinated attack on myself and Councillor Sheridan. We're off a duck's back. We've been here before.
Okay, Councillor Nicholson, you want to come in and answer that question that was asked of you? Can everyone else turn their mics off, please?
Sorry, Provost. I didn't think it required a serious response. I've answered it anyway. I wasn't invited to the photo shoot.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm going to move now to Councillor Don and ask Councillor Don to sum up.
Opportunity, Provost. Provost, will I be given the same opportunity?
Who's speaking?
Councillor Sheridan.
Same opportunity for what?
To respond.
To who?
To the criticism that came my way.
Did you ask to? Sorry?
You're inviting everyone else to respond. I'm asking, can I respond also? It's a perfectly fair question.
That's because Councillor Nicholson put a Q in his box saying that he wanted to respond. You didn't. Perhaps your leader, Councillor Devine, will have a word with you after this meeting about your manners, because your manners are quite frankly abominable today.
A simple question.
Councillor
Will I be allowed to respond?
Councillor Dawn, please come in and sum up.
Yep, thanks, Provost. So I just want to start this motion didn't read "Thank you, volunteers, for the work that we made you do during lockdown." That's not what it was. It was just thank you to the volunteers for the work that you're doing and that you enjoy doing. This is about the community and the council working together. I actually feel like a broken record saying this because I say it all the time. Community and council working together. And Councillor Sheridan, if you'd been involved in the campaign, you would know that. It's actually extremely popular in your ward, as Councillor Doig said. Some of the local groups in your ward are hugely behind Team Up to Clean Up. So really, I think you're disrespecting them and all the hard work that gets done in your area and everywhere else with your comments. It wasn't started in primary schools. You're actually completely misinformed about that. It started off as a Facebook group for anybody that wanted to get involved, and it started off as mostly the local groups and the most active people in their communities. We then did take it into schools because kids enjoy things like this. And again, as Councillor Doig pointed out, this isn't a new thing. I litter picked when I was in Bridgeweir Primary School 20 years ago. So this isn't something that we've just started. We're trying to change behaviours with this. And again, I don't know what people don't understand about that. Young people are the driving force behind a lot of the climate emergency stuff that we're seeing. They care about the environment and they care about the future that they're going to grow up in. So naturally, yeah, it's a good idea to take this into schools. And any time I've been out on a litter pick with any of the primary schools, I've never heard any negativity. They absolutely love it. It's brilliant. So I don't see what the point in saying is we shouldn't be doing that. We've already established that the Labour administration done it back then as well. So just on a final note, I'm going to try and bring this back to a more positive spin because I can't believe the negativity that has surrounded it. This is not just about litter picking, it's about community involvement, community empowerment, working together, intergenerational work. There's so many positives to this. So I just want to, as I say, thank the volunteers, thank the campaign, thank everyone that's involved, and I don't accept your amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to the vote.
Thank you, Provost.
Speaking then, no.
Thank you, Provost. It's a roll call vote. The motion's moved by Councillor Don, seconded by Councillor McEwen. The amendment's moved by Councillor Sheridan, seconded by Councillor Devine. Members, please indicate if they voted Councillor Don's motion or Councillor Sheridan's amendment. Councillor Adam McGregor.
Motion.
Councillor Begg.
Motion.
Councillor Bibby.
Amendment.
Councillor Binks. Councillor Binks.
That's you now, Councillor Binks. Sorry, Councillor Binks, you've muted again.
Hold on.
Probably should I come back to Councillor Binks at the
Yes,
end?
please. Yes, please.
Councillor Brown.
Motion. Sorry. Amendment.
Oh, Bill.
Councillor Burns.
Motion. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, Councillor Binks.
Yes. Motion.
You voted for the motion. Okay, thank you. Councillor Jacqueline Cameron.
Motion.
Provost Cameron.
Motion.
Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Devine.
Eddie.
Amendment. Can I say it twice? Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Doig.
Amendment.
Councillor Audrey Doig.
Motion.
Councillor Don.
Motion.
Councillor Grady.
Amendment.
Councillor Graham.
Motion.
Councillor Hart.
Amendment.
Councillor Hood.
Amendment.
Councillor Hughes.
Motion.
Councillor Kennedy.
Amendment.
You just check if Councillor Kerr is there, in case he's got back in.
No, Councillor Kerr's had to leave as I've got a family emergency.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mackay.
Almost forgotten what we're voting for. Motion.
Councillor James McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Kenny McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Mags McLaren. Councillor Mags McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor McCulloch.
Abstain.
Councillor McEwen.
Motion.
Councillor McGutt.
Sorry, I can't unmute.
We can hear you, Councillor McGutt.
I can hear you though.
Councillor McGutt, you've gone back to mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Right, that's good. Motion, thanks. I've lost you. It's come off. You've come off the screen completely.
Councillor McIntyre.
Motion.
Councillor McNaughton.
Motion.
Councillor Mylett.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholson.
Motion.
Councillor Patterson.
Motion.
Councillor Rodden.
Motion.
Councillor Sharkey.
Amendment.
Councillor Shaw.
Motion.
Councillor Sheridan.
Amendment.
Councillor Steele.
Motion.
And Councillor Strang.
Motion.
I have 26 for the motion, 10 for the amendment, and 1 abstention. The motion's carried.
Thank you. Pleased to know that we're in the very final motion. It's item 24 on the agenda, and it's motion 14 by Councillors Kennedy and Sharkey. Councillor Kennedy, do you want to read out your motion?
Yes, thanks, Provost. It's Council regrets the disruption to the community and in particular the business owners who have been inconvenienced by the pedestrian barriers placed in Wells Street, Well Meadow Street and the Glasgow Road. Council agrees that reasonable compensation should be paid to those businesses affected.
Okay, do you want to speak further to your motion?
Well, I've been dealing with this for quite a while, particularly with the business owners in Wells Street. It's been an absolute shambles from the day these barriers went in. They went in with absolutely no consultation, despite being told that the consultation did take place, business owners were spoken to. They are saying that they weren't spoken to. There was only one business owner that had a casual conversation over this. Thankfully, the barriers have actually been taken away from Wells Street now after pressure from these business owners. I just feel that they have been highly inconvenienced. It's placed a lot of stress on them. A lot of them have seen their takings reduced by 40 to 50% when these barriers were placed in the street. Not to mention the fact that it was actually making Wells Street even more dangerous with the amount of traffic trying to go up and down a reduced roadway. Obviously, Glasgow Road is not in my ward, but I know there's a lot of concern there at the moment. Well Meadow Street, whilst didn't have the barriers in place, the stress was still put there by the idea of these barriers going in place. And I would just like to, especially to see Councillor McEwen publicly apologise to these people for the stress and the inconvenience they've been placed under. Thank you.
Okay, and your seconder, Councillor Sharkey.
Thank you, Provost. I mean, wholeheartedly agree with the points that have been made about the lack of consultation. That's certainly the feedback I've had from the people on Glasgow Road. But there was a specific...
You got that laptop, you silly cat, you. Come here. Right,
Well,
you finished.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Well, can you mute
Sorry,
your
my cat
microphone?
jumped in my laptop.
Right. Well, I'm glad to know that those remarks weren't directed at me now, right? So, but to start again, then there's a specific problem with the Glasgow Road and where they've been placed. The population, for various reasons, round about that area of Glasgow Road is highly concentrated towards the elderly section of our population. And these barriers provide a real barrier, a real difficulty of access for older people who are used to crossing the road to get, in many cases, their essential shopping. But specifically, one of the problems made here is that we've also had in the past, and I was reminded there of Councillor Mackay's phrase when he said about the council shooting itself in the foot, because these bus borders that were put on to make, in fact, the elderly population, make it easier for them to get on the buses, and indeed everybody. These bus borders stick out into the road and narrow it and cause choke points. But that wasn't given proper consideration when these big water-filled buckets were put down. And as a result, it caused not just a pinch point, but it forces cyclists either to go over this bus border, which it's there for people to stand on, right? So if you push the bus, so if you push the cycles over it, you're not only creating a difficulty for the cyclists. There's the people who are waiting at the stop as well. So it's very ill thought out, very dangerous as far as that's concerned. Something that hasn't been mentioned a lot, but again, if these things are making access difficult for people with restricted mobility, they're equally making things difficult for people who have a legitimate reason to park in the road and with their hands full take stuff into the shop. And of course, that's the deliveries that come there. And every one of the shops, even those who are lucky enough to have access at the back, have had problems with that. So it's as far as Glasgow Road is concerned, this was a thoroughly ill thought out and unfortunate issue. But it's not as if the people have just been quiet about it. The shopkeepers have regularly made representations. I understand that a police officer has attended on 2 different occasions to look at the dangers that are associated with this. Yet the council refuses to acknowledge that this police officer has even been there. Police, obviously, the council has sent officials as well. Right? We don't know what the result of that is. I can't find out if we've ever had a proper safety examination, and some of the shopkeepers have been put to an expense by providing one of them themselves, which is why it's very important that we show businesses that we are prepared to stand by them when their business has been affected, or they've been given an unusual expense, right? Because of the because of the local council's policy. So I'd just like to sum this up, because and this is a quote from one of the shopkeepers. It's just, you've done it wrong, right? You've got it wrong, right? You're continuing to get it wrong. Why don't you just back down and fix it? And that's the only message I've got from the council today. Back down and fix it. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor. Mark Conahan. Mark, do you want to come in and say something?
Sorry, thank you, Provost. Just very briefly, Councillor Mack, can you confirm if you're still in the meeting, because your phone number is shown as being open and I don't want to close it off with it if you are still listening in. I think Provost, on the basis that Councillor Mack's not come back in, I'll close that number off just to stop the background noise feeding through.
Yes, I'm agreeable to that. Okay, I've had a notification that we have an amendment from Councillor McEwen. And
I've put my amendment up. Sorry, it's Councillor Graham first there, 1717.
Where have you put your amendment, Councillor Graham?
Above where Alistair Mackay says comment, please.
No.
It doesn't bother me who goes first, so if you want to do Councillor McEwen's first,
No,
that's fine.
I can't see that. That must be in. You must have put it in the chat box and not given it to the officer.
I gave it to David Lowe as well, so David Lowe does have it.
Okay. My apologies because I don't see it in my chat.
I'm happy to do mine second.
Okay, we'll go with Cathy first. Cathy.
Okay, thank you, Provost. The amendment reads, Council agrees that there should be a review of the process regarding the implementation of temporary traffic regulation orders, TTROs, in the Wells Street, Well Meadow Street and Glasgow Road vicinities as a response to providing social distancing measures. Council also notes that there is a recognised legal process for the payment of compensation and that any individual or business should seek advice on pursuing loss or damages from the council through this process. I don't know if you want me to carry on, Provost, at this stage?
No, who's your seconder, Councillor McEwen?
Yeah, my seconder is Councillor Don.
Councillor Don. Okay, I think we also have amendments from, we have another amendment from Councillor Andy Doig, seconded by Councillor Hood. Councillor Doig.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. The amendment reads, Council further agrees that reasonable compensation should also be paid to business owners in Johnson High Street in view of similar disruption to retail activity. Very briefly, Provost, I'm glad to hear if the barriers are away in Well Meadow Street in the West End of Paisley, the traders in Johnson High Street would dearly wish that they're also removed also, and can I make a formal request today and now that they are removed? I accept, Provost, that the intention was to promote social distancing. I accept that the intention was positive, but the traders are telling me that the footfall has been reduced to so low an extent in some parts of the high street, the barriers are actually not necessary, and what they're doing is deterring what footfall there is, because they're stopping parking and they're stopping elderly people in particular seem to have an issue with them, people with disabilities. So I think, the council has to learn the lesson. I agree with the general thrust of the motion. If there's going to be compensation for traders in Paisley, and I think Johnson High Street should also get the same benefit. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Your seconder is Councillor Hood, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, we also have an amendment from Councillor Graham. Who is your seconder, Councillor Graham?
Councillor McIntyre.
Okay, can you read your amendment, please?
It's just really if Councillor Sharkey will accept it, it's just an addition to Councillor Sharkey's. It just puts after council further calls for the removal of barriers on Glasgow Road. So it's just a very small addition.
Okay, I will go through these with Councillor Kennedy to ask her if she's going to accept any of the amendments.
Sorry, Councillor Kennedy, not Sharkey. Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Councillor Kennedy, are you willing to accept the amendment by Councillor McEwen? Councillor Kennedy? I think you might be muted. Councillor Kennedy, I can see that she is muted.
Sorry, could we go ahead with the discussion and then I'll decide?
Okay. I don't know that there is any further discussion, Councillor Kennedy. I think everyone's made their point, unless...
No, I want to...
Councillor McEwen, do you want to come back in?
Yes, please, Provost, if you would allow me. In regards to the first part of motion 14, where the words disruptive and inconvenience are used, we cannot lose sight of why social distancing measures have to be a consideration in the first place, and I'm quite sure you do take that on board. I'm sure that we can all feel disruption and inconvenience to our normal daily lives at this time, especially at this time. But we understand the real threat of COVID-19 and the need for social distancing. That's all I'm going to say on that. We do need to understand that. As stated in this amendment, there would be a review, Karen, and it's put in place in order to consider the temporary traffic regulation orders in respect of social distancing, as I've said, in the areas of Wells Street, Wellmeadow Street and Glasgow Road. The results of this review will, of course, be brought back to a future board of the council. So yes, it's not going to wait, it'll be brought back, it'll be dealt with. In respect to the second part of the motion, where compensation is asked for, any compensation claim against Renfrewshire Council to be a consideration, there is a legal policy already in place to ensure that all claims are addressed. It would be right and correct that all claims are handled in the same manner. So to finish off, I would ask that this council support my amendment. It goes even further to answer any concerns regarding this particular temporary traffic regulation orders. And it also points to compensation policy already set up for consideration of any complaints against Renfrewshire Council. So I would hope that you would accept the amendment, Karen.
Okay, I think that Councillor Adam McGregor would like to make an addition to Councillor McEwen's amendment. Would that be right, Councillor Adam McGregor?
Yes, Provost, that's correct.
Okay.
It's just a small addition, and that would read that the barriers be removed from Glasgow Road, starting from Lacey Street and continuing along to Crossflat Crescent with immediate effect, and they would continue to monitor the situation going forward, given the close proximity of Paisley Grammar.
Okay. Thank you. I have Councillor Binks and Councillor Mackay so far who want to speak. Councillor Binks?
And me, Provost.
You, okay, Eddie, heard you.
I didn't have any comment to make, but as I'm on the phone now, I will. It's just an addition to remove barriers from Johnson High Street, as trade has been devastated by them. But I think that, Councillor Doig has covered this particular question. Is that right, Andy?
Yes,
Okay. Okay, Councillor Binks. Councillor Binks, are you still there?
I'm still here, yes.
Okay, do you wish to say anything further? Is that you okay?
No, I'm okay. It's
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mackay?
Hello, yes. It's all getting a bit complicated, all these different tacked on bits. I think it's important to remember what these temporary barriers were there for. It was to allow pedestrian access along congested pavements while people were queuing for the likes of chemists and other places of great popularity at the time. And they were always designed to be temporary and fluid and flexible. The ones in Johnston High Street, for example, are actually situated where the yellow lines are, where people were constantly ignoring those and parking there anyway. So I don't see that the shops can argue that they've lost a lot of trade because there's adequate parking around the area. Obviously can't speak for the other areas because I don't know them so well. However, I do know Glasgow Road, and yes, it's a little bit complicated going along there sometimes, but I still see the point of the barriers because it's to enable the school children to get to the school safely using the footways, or the adjusted footways as they are. I agree that there needs to be some degree of flexibility, and where barriers are found not to be useful, then they should be removed. But I think we've got an awfully complicated voting system here today, or proposal and seconded amendments. If we could just perhaps agree to the fact that these things are flexible and they'll be examined and relocated if necessary. But I'm not so sure that financial compensation is appropriate at the moment, because how do you gauge that financial compensation? If it's all right for shops to say they've lost 50% of their custom, but quite a lot of shops have lost custom due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Who's to say it's due to a barrier part positioned up on top of the yellow line that's outside their shop anyway? So I just ask for some common sense approach here, and perhaps let's avoid the financial compensation at the moment and just address the issues that the barriers are causing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Perhaps, Jenny, I don't know if you've already posted your addition to Councillor McEwen's amendment in the chat box, but if you haven't, could you do that now so that other councillors can read it?
I believe it came up quite a while ago, Lorraine.
Okay, thanks, Jenny.
Must have put it up.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eddie Devine.
Thanks, Provost. I would just say to Alistair Mackay, if Alistair could actually see the width of the ridiculous so-called separation of people in Glasgow Road that's actually there just now, it actually shuts off half the road in Glasgow.
Eddie, could I stop you for a second? Could I just make sure everyone's microphones are off? And Jim, if you're dialing in on a phone, could you put it on silent? I think it's number 6 that you press.
It's *6 if to mute.
Is it *6? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, Eddie, we'll try again.
Sorry, as I was saying, if Alistair or anybody else had actually seen the so-called space in Glasgow Road, I've seen the stuff in Welsh Street, and I've seen the stuff in Glasgow Road, and it is totally and utterly over the top. Now, the shopkeepers in Welsh Street, Well Meadow and Glasgow Road have all said the same thing, and I've got a bundle of papers here from the shopkeepers in Glasgow Road. There was no consultation. That was their big problem. If they were told, as I remember from some of the councillors, some of the shopkeepers in Welsh Street, that if anybody had came to them and actually discussed it with them, they could have come to some arrangement. They weren't against social distancing. What they were against was half the road being shut off. No delivery vehicles on both sides of the road because of in Welsh Street I'm talking about, both sides of the road. Nobody could park anywhere to get deliveries. They were parking around the corner of Underwood Lane or further down Arthur Street and carrying stuff about 150 yards up the road to deliver it to the butchers and the rest of them. It was ridiculous. It was not done properly and according to every single shopkeeper, and there was probably a couple of dozen shopkeepers that we've spoken to in all the areas we're talking about. And I see that Councillor McEwen, I think it's basically a climb down, and I'm happy to see Councillor Adam McGregor, that the barriers be removed from Glasgow Road. That's what they've been asking for from the very start. Now, if the barriers had been removed from the Glasgow Road and people had actually spoken to the shopkeepers, again, they're not against social distancing. What they are against is a completely and utterly ridiculous state of affairs in Glasgow Road. It is just unbelievable that anybody would think that was correct. There has been no consultation with any shopkeepers. Now, that is a fact, and I'm quite sure there's also one business out there who employs 60 people who are now saying in Glasgow Road, who are now saying that they may have to get rid of some of their workers because they can't get near the shop. There's also an extremely good butcher there. This isn't an advert. Who's also saying that they may have to get rid. They may have to let 2 people go from their employment. That cannot be right. We should not be accepting that people are going to be possibly paid off because we can't get out there and speak to people face to face. It is not acceptable that the Environmental Department have been absolutely ridiculous in the way they've handled this, and it needs to be sorted out. Now, if you're saying to me that all the barriers are going to be removed, Councillor Adam McGregor, and at least you're going to start talking to people, we're quite happy with that. The people out there they would like compensation, and I'm quite sure they might take it up, but even just apologise for the shambles that the Environmental Department has inflicted on these shopkeepers. I don't know if anybody's seen it on the TV last night. It made Renfrewshire Council look like clowns, the way it was presented. Now, I've seen the pictures, and I can show you the pictures of it. Says no cycling. People were cycling across the no cycling sign. That is just ludicrous. So I would. It's not up to me, but I would accept. The Conservative one, and now I'm looking at Councillor McGregor's. I would be happy if I was Councillor Kennedy to accept that as well. So I'm not against a bit of sanity coming into this. Thanks, Provost.
Councillor Andy Doig.
Can you hear you, Andy?
Andy Doig.
Thanks. Sorry, Provost. Forgot to unmute the mic. It was just a quick point to say to Councillor Mackay, I think you should talk to Councillor Binks, who's got a much better understanding of the concern and the worry amongst the traders in Johnson High Street. I've had some of them on the phone to me recently, nearly in tears. So to say that they're not being much affected is just seriously wrong, I'm afraid. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we have anyone else who wants to speak, unless any of the seconders want to speak of the amendments before I go to the summing up by Councillor Kennedy. Councillor McIntyre.
Nothing to add, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillor Hood.
I'm okay. We've been here. I'm okay. We've been here long enough.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hood. Councillor Don.
Same, I've nothing to add.
Okay, can you make sure all of your microphones are off? Councillor Don, did you respond?
Sorry, I thought you heard me, Provost. I've nothing to add, sorry.
Okay, Councillor Sharkey, did you just photograph the screen?
Yes, I did. Just in case anybody doesn't believe that we spent 8 hours, 38 minutes and 39 seconds on that particular piece of work.
Okay. I just thought I would ask you that because I think it's right that all of the councillors that are in this meeting know that you've taken a photograph of the screen.
Yeah, just a bit. So just
Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Kennedy, can you let me know if you're accepting the amendment by Councillor McEwen as amended by Councillor Adam McGregor?
More than happy to accept as additions Councillor Doig's and the Conservative one.
Right. Right.
Not accepting Councillor McEwen's, no.
Okay, then we'll just go to the vote then, Ken. You want to sum up, Councillor Kennedy?
No, I don't want to hold him up any longer. I've got stuff to do as well.
Thank you, Ken. Can we go to the vote, please?
Thank you, Provost. So we've got the motion moved by Councillor Kennedy, which now includes the amendments proposed by Councillor Andy Doig and by Councillor Graham. And if I'm correct, also includes the amendment proposed by Councillor Adam McGregor.
No.
Sorry?
Yes, I'm happy to include that as an addition. Yes.
Okay.
So, and that's seconded by Councillor Sharkey, and now we have the amendment which is moved by Councillor McEwen, which also includes the amendment proposed by Councillor Adam McGregor, seconded by Councillor Don.
Okay.
Please indicate if you're voting for Councillor Kennedy's motion or Councillor McEwen's amendment. Councillor Adam McGregor.
Motion.
Councillor Begg.
Motion.
Councillor Bibby.
Motion.
Councillor Binks.
Motion.
Ken, I think people are confused with what you're saying.
I can hear him.
I'll just repeat what I said earlier. So, according to my notes, the motion is the original motion by Councillor Kennedy, which now includes the amendments made by Councillor Andy Doig and Councillor Graham, and also Councillor Adam McGregor's amendment. Whereas we've got the original amendment by Councillor McEwen. The only amendment to that was the amendment which was also accepted from Councillor Adam McGregor. So in effect, Councillor Adam McGregor's amendment is part of both of the sides of it, but obviously it's just a small element of both. So would members like me to start again on the basis of that explanation?
Can I just confirm there then that Councillor Adam McGregor's addition is an addition to both the motion and the amendment?
That's right, yes.
Okay.
Well, did Councillor, I am very sorry. Did Councillor Adam McGregor agree to her addition being added on to the motion by Councillor Kennedy?
It's not up to her.
Was it not?
It's perfectly legitimate for it to, because it's just part of the final version. It's perfectly legitimate for it to be an element of both.
Clear this up. I'll accept a lot of them, and Councillor McEwen's as well.
But Councillor McEwen's is replace, is it not, rather than addition?
Yes.
Provost, could I speak?
Yeah. Can I please ask everyone to put their microphones off and let Councillor Kennedy speak, please? This is your motion, Councillor Kennedy, so we should be addressing you.
Sorry, just to solve all. I mean, I think we're all in agreement that these barriers were wrong. I think we all agree that they should be removed. The question of compensation has been answered, and obviously businesses can seek to claim compensation.